So hey anime fans. The series name is What If Naruto Fell in Love with Karin. So let's start the series. The echo in the silence. The knock on her door, 5 days into her confinement, was firm but not aggressive. Karin's senses had already told her who it was, that blinding, solar signature dimmed to a gentle glow. She debated not answering. Let the golden boy think she was asleep, or dead. But a perverse curiosity, and the ingrained habit of obeying those with power, made her slide off her bed and pad to the door. She opened it a crack, the chain lock engaged. Naruto Uzumaki stood there, a simple bowl covered with a cloth in his hands. He wasn't in his usual orange, instead, he wore a dark blue jacket, the Uzumaki swirl subtly embroidered on the shoulder. He looked older. The boyish roundness of his face had given way to sharper angles, and his eyes held a depth of understanding that hadn't been there before the war. "Hey," he said, offering a smile that was genuine but cautious, not his trademark world-breaking grin. "I figured you might not be venturing out for food yet. Ichiraku's miso ramen with extra pork. Best in the world." Karin stared at him through the gap. "I'm not hungry." Her stomach chose that exact moment to let out a low, traitorous growl. She flushed, fury rising hot and immediate. "Stupid body, always betraying me." Naruto's smile didn't falter, but it softened. "Sounds like it disagrees. Come on, just take it. No strings." He shifted the bowl to one hand and held up the other in a placating gesture. "I'm not coming in. Just delivering." Her pride warred with the aching emptiness in her gut and the deeper, more terrifying emptiness in her chest. The ramen smelled incredible, a rich, savory aroma that cut through the sterile air of her apartment. With a sharp, jerky movement, she unlatched the chain, opened the door just wide enough to snatch the bowl from his hands, and stepped back. "Thanks," she muttered, not meeting his eyes. "You're welcome," he said, his voice steady. He didn't try to peer inside. He just stood there for a moment, a solid, quiet presence. "It gets easier, you know. The quiet." Her head snapped up. "What would you know about it? You've always been surrounded by people. Even when they hated you, they saw you." The words were meant to wound, to push him away. But Naruto only nodded, his expression turning thoughtful. "Yeah. But there's a different kind of quiet. The one inside. The one that comes after all the screaming stops." He met her gaze, his blue eyes holding hers. "That one's the loudest." He gave a small wave. "See you around, Karin." He turned and walked down the hall, his footsteps fading. Karin stood frozen in her doorway, the warm bowl burning her palms. He'd seen it. With one sentence, he'd pinpointed the exact torment she was in. It wasn't the silence of the apartment, it was the silence where Sasuke's voice used to be, where Orochimaru's orders used to be, where the desperate purpose of survival used to scream. Now there was nothing. Just the echo of her own worthlessness. She shut the door, slid down against it, and ate the ramen. Every bite was exquisite, and she hated that too. She hated that his kindness felt like a debt, another chain. She cried as she ate, furious, silent tears dripping into the broth. The ramen became a ritual. Every other day, Naruto would show up at dusk. Sometimes it was ramen, sometimes it was simple onigiri from a convenience store. He never stayed. He'd hand her the food, exchange a few words about the weather or a benign village happening, and leave. One evening, as a late summer storm lashed against her window, he arrived soaked, his hair plastered to his forehead, but the bowl of food under his jacket was perfectly dry. "You're an idiot," Karin said, holding the door open a little wider. "You could have just not come." "And let you starve while listening to your stomach complain from across the village," he said, stepping inside for the first time. He left puddles on her floor. He looked around, taking in the barren space, a bed, a table, a single chair. No decorations. No personal effects. It looked like a prison cell. His cheerful mask slipped for a second, revealing a profound sadness. "What?" Karin snapped, crossing her arms. "Not up to the future Hokage's standards?" "It's just empty," he said quietly. "You should get some plants or something. Something alive." "Things die when I'm around," she said, the words out before she could stop them. She meant the people she'd been forced to watch die for Orochimaru's data. She meant her mother. Naruto looked at her, rainwater dripping from his chin. "Not everything." He didn't elaborate. He placed the food on her table. "It's curry tonight. From a new place. Tell me what you think tomorrow." And he left, a trail of wet footprints behind him. Karin stared at the closed door, then at the curry. The spicy, complex scent filled the empty space. Something alive. She went to the window, watching his bright chakra signature move through the rainy streets until it was absorbed by the larger glow of the village. The next morning, on her reluctant, daily walk to appear compliant, she passed a market. A vendor was selling small, hearty succulents in cracked pots. On an impulse that felt like someone else's, she bought a small, spiky green thing. She placed it on her windowsill. It looked absurdly small and defiant in the emptiness. When Naruto came 2 days later, his eyes went immediately to the plant. He didn't say anything. He just smiled, a real one that crinkled the corners of his eyes. Karin felt her face heat. She wanted to throw the plant at his head. Instead, she heard herself say, the curry was too spicy. He laughed, a bright, warm sound that seemed to push back the shadows in the room. I'll tell the chef. He'll be devastated. The fragile routine shattered on a crisp autumn day. An ANBU team, masks impersonal, appeared at her door. Uzumaki Karin. The Hokage requests your presence. There is a situation. Panic, cold and sharp, lanced through her. Orochimaru. They've changed their minds. They're sending me back. Or to a cell. Her chakra senses flared wildly, and she felt Naruto's signature, along with Sakura's and Shikamaru's, already in the Hokage's tower. It was a trap. It had to be. She thought about running. But where would she go? The world had no place for her. Squaring her shoulders, she followed them, her mind racing with scenarios of betrayal. In the Hokage's office, Kakashi looked up from his desk, his single visible eye calm. Naruto stood to his right, his expression unreadably serious. Sakura gave her a brief, professional nod. Shikamaru lounged against a wall, looking as if this was all a tremendous drag. Karin, Kakashi began, his voice mild. Thank you for coming. We have a problem that plays to your unique skill set. He explained. A remote, mountainous region on the border of Fire Country had reported strange phenomena, animals mutating, local farmers experiencing chakra drain and vivid nightmares. A scout team sent to investigate had returned, altered. One was catatonic, his chakra pathways seared and rerouted in a way that was horrifyingly familiar. It bears the hallmarks of Orochimaru's early biochakra manipulation experiments, Kakashi said. But Orochimaru is under observation and claims no involvement. We believe it may be a remnant cell, or someone attempting to replicate his work. We need a sensory ninja of the highest caliber to locate the source, and someone who understands the nature of these experiments to help us dismantle it safely. All eyes were on her. Karin felt the old, familiar role slide over her like a shroud. The useful one. The tool. Her knowledge of Orochimaru's horrors was her value. Why should I help you? She asked, her voice cold. What do I get out of it? Naruto spoke before Kakashi could. How about the chance to smash one of those cages for good? His voice was low, intense. Not for us. For you. To prove to yourself that it doesn't own you anymore. His words struck her like a physical blow. He saw through the brittle anger to the fear beneath. He was offering her not a pardon, but agency. A fight she might actually want to have. She looked from his determined face to Kakashi's waiting one. Fine, she spat. But I lead the sensory sweep. And I'm not taking orders from anyone who doesn't understand what we're dealing with. You'll be partnered with Naruto and Sakura, Kakashi said smoothly. They have the power to handle physical threats, and Sakura's medical knowledge is unparalleled. You provide the direction and the technical insight. A team. With them. The idol and the girl who had what Karin had once foolishly wanted. Resentment bubbled up, acidic and old. Sakura stepped forward, her tone clinical but not unkind. I've studied the scout's condition. The chakra grafting is primitive but vicious. Your first-hand experience could mean the difference between saving any victims we find and losing them. It was an appeal to her utility, but framed as a partnership. Karin gave a stiff nod. Great. Naruto said, the serious leader mask replaced by a flash of his old enthusiasm. We leave at dawn. Pack for mountains and creepy science stuff. As they filed out, Naruto hung back. When they were alone in the hall, he looked at her. You okay with this? Do I have a choice? She retorted. Always, he said, simply. Saying no was always an option. You said yes. That means something. He walked away, leaving her standing in the polished corridor. He's wrong, she thought fiercely. I never had choices. But as she returned to her empty apartment, her mind already cataloging the dangers of rogue experiments, she felt a flicker of something she couldn't name. It wasn't freedom. It was colder, sharper. Purpose. She looked at the small succulent on the windowsill, its green defiant against the gray sky. Something alive. Dawn was coming. And for the first time in a long time, she was not just waiting for it. She was walking towards it. Chapter 2, The Mountains That Whisper. The forest at the base of the mountains was too quiet. It wasn't the peaceful silence of nature, but a held breath, a vacuum where sound should have been. Karin led the way, her sensory abilities stretched out like 1,000 invisible threads, probing the landscape. Every rustle of a leaf, every drip of moisture from the towering pines, was catalogued, analyzed, and dismissed. Her focus was absolute, a grim scowl etched on her face. Behind her, Naruto and Sakura moved with the easy, efficient grace of a long-established team. Sakura's footsteps were near silent, her green eyes constantly scanning their surroundings for physical signs of disturbance. Naruto, for all his usual boisterousness, was subdued, his own powerful senses honed by sage training and Kurama's instincts on high alert. His bright chakra was deliberately banked, a low, controlled burn rather than a roaring flame. "Anything?" Sakura asked, her voice soft but carrying in the stillness. Karin didn't turn. Lots of animal chakra signatures. But they're wrong. Twisted. Flickering. Like a candle guttering in oil. She pointed a finger off to the northeast, up a steep, scree-covered slope. The epicenter is that way. About 3 kilometers. The air tastes like rancid honey and lightning. Rancid honey? Naruto murmured. Orochimaru's preservation solution for delicate chakra organs, Karin said flatly. He used it in the early transitional grafting experiments. It has a unique chakra residue. A wave of nausea, unrelated to the scent memory, washed over her. She remembered the cold steel tables, the jars lining the walls, the desperate, fading pulses from within them. "You okay?" Naruto's voice was closer now. He had moved up beside her, not crowding, but present. "I'm functional," she snapped, pushing her glasses up her nose. "Worry about the mission. My past is my problem." "It's the mission's problem now, too," Sakura said, not unkindly. "Your intel is our best weapon. But if you need a moment." "I don't," Karin cut her off, starting forward again, her boots crunching on the brittle undergrowth. She felt their exchanged glance on her back like a physical touch. "They're assessing me. The unstable former enemy. The useful tool." The old script played in her head, a litany of self-loathing that was as familiar as her own heartbeat. They climbed for an hour. The terrain grew more grotesque. Trees were twisted into agonized shapes, their bark weeping a viscous, phosphorescent sap. Strange fungi pulsed with a sickly internal light. The animal life they glimpsed was monstrous, a squirrel with an extra, malformed head chittering madly, a bird whose feathers were replaced by glistening, chitinous plates. "The natural chakra here is corrupted," Naruto said, his eyes glowing faintly with the gold of sage mode as he tested the air. "It's not just a lab leak. Something's actively poisoning the land." "A dispersal matrix," Karin said, stopping and kneeling. She placed a hand on the damp earth, ignoring the cold seeping through her gloves. She closed her eyes, extending her senses deep into the soil. Lines of malevolent energy spiderwebbed beneath them, a cancerous root system feeding on the mountain's life force. It's drawing energy from everything and funneling it towards the source. A forced evolution incubator. Crude, but effective. "Can you trace the lines back?" Sakura asked, crouching beside her, medical chakra glowing at her fingertips as she examined a mutated flower. "Obviously," Karin said, standing and brushing off her knees. "But we're getting close. The matrix is denser here. It'll be defended." No sooner had the words left her mouth than the earth erupted around them. From the soil burst humanoid figures, their bodies a patchwork of mismatched flesh and crude cybernetic enhancements. Their eyes were blank, pupilless orbs that glowed with the same sickly energy as the fungi. They moved with a jerky, unnatural speed. "The scout team," Sakura breathed, horror in her voice. "And others." "They're being piloted," Karin said, her sensory vision piercing the grotesque shells. "There's a core of original chakra, but it's trapped, overridden by a parasitic control signal. Coming from the source." The creatures attacked without sound, a silent, lethal wave. Sakura moved first, her fist cratering the ground where the lead abomination stood, the shockwave blowing 2 others apart. Naruto was a blur of orange and blue, shadow clones multiplying and engaging with precise taijutsu, aiming to disable rather than destroy. Karin hung back, analyzing. Her fighting style was never frontline. She was a sensor, a tactician. She watched the flows of the parasitic chakra, seeing the slight lag between the core's impulse and the body's movement. Left knee joint on the tall one. Right actuator conduit on the one with the blade arm, she barked. Naruto's clones struck the exact points she indicated, and the creatures crumpled, spasming. He shot her a quick, fierce grin over his shoulder. "Nice call." A warm, foreign feeling flickered in her chest. Useful. But not just a tool. A partner. She shoved the feeling down. Sentiment is weakness. One of the creatures, faster than the others, bypassed the clones and charged straight for Karin. Its mouth opened in a silent scream, a plasma cutter humming to life on its wrist. Karin's mind blanked for a second, caught between the instinct to fight and the old, deep-seated instinct to be a victim. A flash of orange. Naruto was there, his back to her, a Rasengan forming in his hand. He didn't use it. Instead, he caught the creature's blade arm with his bare hand, Kurama's chakra flaring to protect him, and with a brutal wrench, tore it from its socket. He then drove a palm heel strike into its chest, not to destroy, but to disrupt. A pulse of pure, dense Uzumaki chakra, so similar to her own yet infinitely vaster, flared from his touch. The parasitic signal inside the creature short-circuited. It collapsed, the malevolent light fading from its eyes, revealing for a second the terrified, grateful gaze of the human trapped within before he fell unconscious. Naruto stood panting slightly, his back still to her, a protective wall between her and the threat. "You gotta watch your six, Karin," he said, his voice tight with adrenaline. "You're part of the team now. We cover each other." The statement was so simple, so absolute. You're part of the team. Not an asset. Not a prisoner. A member. Sakura finished disabling the last creature with a series of precise chakra scalpels, severing the control links. The clearing fell silent again, save for their breathing and the faint, pitiful whimpers from the liberated humans. "They're alive," Sakura said, her hands already glowing with healing chakra as she moved to the first victim. "But their systems are shredded. I can stabilize them, but we need to end this at the source." Karin was staring at Naruto's back, at the Uzumaki swirl that seemed to pulse in time with her own heartbeat. He had used their chakra, a technique born of sheer, stubborn vitality, to free a victim. Not to obliterate, but to liberate. It was the antithesis of everything Orochimaru's science stood for. "The signal is getting stronger," she said, her voice quieter now. "It's reacting to your chakra, Naruto. That pulse you used, it lit you up like a beacon on their grid. The matrix is designed to seek out and harvest potent chakra sources. Yours is a feast." Naruto turned, his sage mode eyes meeting hers. "So we give it a feast it can't handle. You can see the threads, right? The lines feeding it?" She nodded. "Then guide me. We follow the lines to the heart. Sakura, can you hold here, protect these people and set up a field hospital?" Sakura looked conflicted but nodded. "Just don't do anything stupid, Naruto. Karin, keep him in line." Another assumption of partnership. Karin gave a sharp nod. As they moved deeper, leaving Sakura in a protected dome of medical chakra, the forest grew denser, darker. The whispering wasn't her imagination now. It was a psychic pressure, 1,000 stolen voices murmuring in agony and hunger, focused through the matrix. "It's trying to get inside my head," Karin gasped, clutching her temples. Her sensory abilities, her greatest strength, were becoming a liability. She was a wide-open receiver for this torrent of pain. Visions flashed behind her eyes, scalpels, buzzing saws, Orochimaru's smiling face, Sasuke's cold eyes, her mother's fading warmth. "Karin!" Naruto's hand closed around her wrist. His grip was firm, warm. Not restraining, but grounding. A torrent of his chakra, not an aggressive surge, but a steady, gentle flow, washed over her. It was sunlight after a long night, the smell of ramen broth, the sound of honest laughter. It didn't silence the whispers, it built a wall between her and them, a fortress of unwavering self. "Breathe," he said, his voice a low anchor in the psychic storm. "My chakra's got you. It won't let that crap touch you. Focus on my signature. Follow it back." Tears of relief and shame stung her eyes. She was relying on him. Again. But this wasn't like Sasuke, a desperate, obsessive craving for validation. This was shelter. She clung to his chakra signature, using its brilliant, clean light as a lifeline to navigate the murk of her own mind. She anchored herself to him. This way," she managed, pointing towards a cave mouth half hidden by pulsating, vein-like roots. "The core is in there. It's big. And it's hungry. For you." They entered the cave. It was not a natural formation. The walls were smooth, fused stone, lined with organic-looking cables that throbbed with captured chakra. At the center of the vast chamber was a horror that made Karin's blood run cold. It was a giant, pulsating heart-like organ, suspended in a web of cables and tubes. Around it, floating in amniotic fluid, were dozens of pod-like structures, holding human forms in various stages of grotesque transformation. At the heart's apex, partially embedded in the flesh, was a familiar face rendered in twisted metal and circuitry, a crude effigy of Orochimaru. But it was not alive. It was a machine, an automated legacy of his worst ambitions. "A failsafe project," Karin whispered, understanding dawning. "A self-perpetuating experiment designed to continue gathering data and evolving without him. It's achieved a form of consciousness. A hungry one." As they stepped into the chamber, the heart organ pulsed violently. A synthesized voice, a chilling echo of Orochimaru's cadence, filled the air. "Specimen located. Uzumaki lineage. Chakra density, exceptional. Purity, optimal. Commencing harvest protocol." Tendrils of dark energy, tipped with gleaming drills and needles, shot from the walls and the heart itself, aiming unerringly for Naruto. Naruto exploded into action. A swarm of shadow clones intercepted the tendrils, Razengans and fists smashing them apart. But for every one destroyed, 2 more grew. The chamber itself was the enemy. It's using the entire mountain as a battery and a weapon. Naruto yelled, dodging a spear-like tendril that punched through solid rock where he'd stood. Karin's mind raced, her eyes scanning the chamber. Her sensory vision pierced through the grotesque spectacle to the underlying structure. She saw the chakra flows, the control nodes, the weak points in the matrix. This was a puzzle only she could solve. Naruto. It has a core regulation nexus. 7 points, arranged in a ceiling array around the main heart. You need to hit all 7 simultaneously with a precise chakra disruption. Simultaneously? I can make the clones, but the timing. I'll do the timing, she shouted, her fear burned away by the clarity of the problem. This was her language. Get me to the central control conduit. That crystal cluster to the left of the effigy. Without question, Naruto spun, a clone sweeping her up in a fireman's carry. They zigzagged through a storm of lethal tendrils, Naruto and his clones forming a living shield. Debris rained around them. A clone poofed into smoke inches from her face, sacrificed to block a hit meant for her. He deposited her at the base of the glowing crystal cluster. Wires and organic cables snaked from it into the heart. What do I do? He yelled over the din. Make 7 clones. Get them to these exact coordinates, she ordered, her fingers flying as she used a kunai to etch glowing chakra points onto the crystal surface, transferring the spatial data from her mind's eye. On my mark, they all hit with a minimal Rasengan, tuned to the frequency I'm emitting. Your main body needs to be the anchor. Channel your chakra through me. It was an insane plan. It required a level of trust and synchronization they had no right to possess. He had to trust her sensory data implicitly. She had to trust his power and control completely. Naruto didn't hesitate. You heard her, he roared, and 7 clones scattered to the far corners of the chamber. His main body placed a hand on her shoulder, his chakra flowing into her, not to overwhelm, but to empower, to link. Karin closed her eyes, blocking out the chaos. She became the network. She felt the 7 clones' positions, felt the thrumming of the 7 malignant nexus points. She synced her own chakra rhythm with Naruto's, creating a carrier wave. Now. Her voice was a whipcrack. From her body, a perfectly modulated pulse of Uzumaki chakra, amplified and guided by Naruto's immense reserve, shot out along the link to his clones. In perfect, devastating unison, 7 small, brilliant blue Razengans struck 7 exact points. The effect was instantaneous. The entire chamber shuddered. The heart organ let out a deafening screech of feedback. The pulsing lights along the walls and cables stuttered, then went dark. The attacking tendrils fell limp. The synthesized voice gargled and died. Silence, true and deep, fell for the first time. The artificial heart gave one final, convulsive pulse and then began to shrivel, blacken, and crumble into inert dust. The pods holding the victims hissed open, their fluids draining away. Karin slumped, her energy utterly spent. The connection with Naruto's chakra broke, leaving her feeling cold and hollow. Strong arms caught her before she hit the ground. She looked up. Naruto's face was smudged with dirt and grime, his jacket torn, but his eyes were blazing with triumph and something else, respect. Pure, undiluted respect. We did it, he said, his voice full of awe. That was incredible. You were incredible. He was holding her, supporting her weight without a hint of condescension. His gaze held hers, and in that moment, in the ruin of Orochimaru's legacy, Karin didn't see the hero of the hidden leaf, or the boy she'd once dismissed. She saw a man, tired and battle-worn, who had just fought back-to-back with her and trusted her with his power. She saw her own exhausted, fragile reflection in his blue eyes. The last of her defensive walls, the ones not shattered by the psychic assault, trembled. A single, traitorous thought escaped the fortress of her heart. What if this is what belonging feels like? Then, a faint, new pulse echoed through the dying matrix. Not from the heart, but from deep beneath the chamber. A deeper, older, and infinitely more hungry presence, stirred awake by the massive discharge of Uzumaki chakra. A low, tectonic groan vibrated through the stone. Naruto's head snapped up, his sage mode reactivating. Oh, you gotta be kidding me. Karin's senses, even drained, felt it. A vast, slumbering chakra, ancient and malignant, now turning its attention upward. Towards the light. Towards them. The mountain's whisper had just become a roar. Chapter 3, What Lies Beneath. The groan was not a sound of the earth, but a sound from the earth, a deep, psychic vibration that bypassed the ears and resonated directly in the marrow. The crumbling chamber, now lit only by the fading glow of dying crystals and Naruto's sage mode eyes, shuddered. A web of cracks shot across the floor, not from the surface down, but from somewhere immeasurably deep, radiating upward. Naruto's grip on Karin tightened instinctively, pulling her back from the widening central fissure. What is that? He breathed, his voice low with a tension Karin had rarely heard in him. It wasn't fear, but the recognition of a scale of threat that dwarfed the mechanical horror they just dismantled. Karin, her senses frayed and raw, forced them outward again. It was like probing a fresh wound with a hot needle. The presence she felt below was not a chakra signature as she understood it. It was an absence, a sucking void that pulled at the very energy of the world around it. It felt old, older than the mountains, a hunger that had slept for centuries and was now blinking awake in the darkness. It's the source, she gasped, a sharp pain lancing through her temples. The experiment, it wasn't creating. It was tapping. It was built on a puncture wound in the world. We just ripped the bandage off. The floor beneath the withered heart organ collapsed entirely, stone and metal vanishing into a blackness so profound it seemed to swallow light. A wind, cold and carrying the scent of deep stone and ozone, howled upward from the abyss. We have to get back to Sakura, Naruto said, already turning, pulling Karin with him towards the cavern entrance. A second, more violent tremor rocked the chamber. The entrance they'd come through vanished in a cataclysm of falling rock and snapping, whip-like roots that now seemed to writhe with a will of their own. The ceiling groaned, dust and debris raining down. In moments, they were sealed in, the only light Naruto's golden eyes and the faint, dying bioluminescence of the chamber. Damn it! Naruto slammed a fist against the new wall of rubble. It didn't budge. He could likely blast through, but the stability of the entire cavern was now in question. A wrong move could bring the mountain down on their heads. Karin sank to her knees, the adrenaline crash and sensory overload hitting her at once. The psychic pressure from below was growing, a whispering, insistent pull that promised oblivion. It whispered of rest, of an end to the struggle, of surrendering the precious, painful energy that was her life. It was a siren song for the soul. Karin! Naruto was beside her in an instant, his hands on her shoulders. Look at me. Don't listen to it. That's not for you. His voice was a lifeline, his chakra a bonfire in the growing psychic chill. She focused on it, clawing her way back from the edge. It wants to eat everything, starting with the biggest source it can sense. She looked up at him, her glasses askew, her eyes wide with a terror that was entirely rational. You. It wants you first. Another tremor. The floor tilted. With a deafening crack, a section near the new pit gave way. Naruto lunged, grabbing Karin and leaping backward as the ground they just occupied slid into the void. They landed hard on an unstable ledge that now circled the new, much larger opening into the depths. There was no way out but down. Naruto helped her to her feet, his expression grimly determined. Okay. New plan. We go down there, and we shut this thing off for good. Are you insane? Karin hissed, panic giving her voice a shrill edge. That's a primordial chakra parasite. It's not a ninja. You can't punch it. Maybe not, he said, his gaze fixed on the darkness below. But I've got the world's best sensor with me. And you've got me. We find its core, its weakness. We hit it with everything we've got. Together. Together. The word hung in the frigid air. He said it with such absolute conviction. As if their partnership, forged in a single battle, was an unshakable fact of the universe. Karin wanted to scream at him, to tell him he was a naive fool. But the warmth of his hand on her arm, the steady, defiant glow of his chakra, it was the only solid thing left in her collapsing world. She took a shuddering breath, pushing her glasses up with a trembling hand. It's attracted to your energy. You're a beacon. If we go down there with you shining like this, it'll swallow you whole before we can blink. Naruto frowned, considering. He let Sage Mode drop, the gold fading from his eyes. But even his normal chakra was a brilliant sun in the sensory dark. I can't just turn it off. No, Karin said, her mind clicking into analytical gear, a desperate refuge from the terror. But I can mask it. Temporarily. My chakra chains, they have sealing properties. I can weave a dampening field around us, a bubble that diffuses your signature, makes us look like background noise. But, she hesitated, the implication chilling her more than the cavern's air. It would require a constant, close proximity link. And it would drain me. Fast. Naruto met her eyes. How close? She looked away, her face heating. Physical contact. Sustained. He didn't flinch. He simply nodded, as if she'd suggested a tactical formation. Okay. Do it. The practicality of it was almost insulting. She was proposing an intimacy born of sheer survival, and he accepted it like a soldier accepting a ration. Swallowing her pride in the confusing flutter in her chest, she turned to face him. Give me your hands. He held them out, palms up. She placed her smaller hands over his. His skin was rough with calluses, warm with life. She closed her eyes, pushing aside the memory of the last time she'd offered her chakra so freely to Sasuke, who had taken it without a second thought and left her for dead. This is different, she told herself fiercely. This is a trade. An alliance. Taking a deep breath, she focused. Crimson chakra, the color of her hair and her heritage, flickered around her hands. It flowed down her arms, coalescing into ethereal, glowing chains, not the massive, destructive weapon she'd used in battle, but fine, intricate links, delicate as lace. They spiraled out from her, not to bind, but to weave. They wrapped around their joined hands, up their arms, forming a complex, shimmering lattice that encased them both in a cocoon of Uzumaki sealing energy. The effect was immediate for Karin. Naruto's overwhelming chakra presence, which usually felt like standing next to a roaring furnace, muted. It was still there, a vast, deep ocean beneath the surface, but its light was diffused, its heat contained. To her senses, they now registered as a single, indistinct blob of moderate chakra, two Uzumaki signatures blending into one another. For Naruto, the sensation was strange. He felt Karin's chakra not as an external force, but as a sheath, a second skin. It was sharp, intelligent, and beneath its defensive bristle, he felt a profound and aching loneliness that resonated with a forgotten part of his own soul. He also felt the immense strain it put on her, a fine tremor ran through her hands into his. Okay, she whispered, her eyes still closed in concentration. It's holding. But we need to move. I can't maintain this forever. They began their descent into the abyss, picking their way down the unstable, crumbling ledge that spiraled into the darkness. Naruto took the lead, his free hand occasionally shooting out to steady her when the footing gave way. The crimson lattice around them cast a faint, bloody light, just enough to see a few feet ahead. The air grew colder, thicker, humming with the malevolent energy from below. The whispering grew louder. It wasn't in any language, but a direct assault on intent. Images flashed in their minds. Naruto saw the villagers of Konoha turning away from him, their faces blank. He saw Sasuke dying in his arms. He saw himself alone, forever outside the warmth of the Hokage's office. Karin saw Orochimaru's approving smile as she betrayed another for his favor. She saw Sasuke's sword piercing her chest again. She saw her mother's lifeless eyes. She saw Naruto, his back turned, walking away into the light, leaving her in the dark. It's trying to break us, Naruto muttered, his jaw clenched. Find our fears and pry us apart. It's working, Karin breathed, a sob catching in her throat. The vision of Naruto abandoning her felt more real, more devastating, than any of Orochimaru's torments. No, it's not. His grip on her hand tightened. Hey. Look at me. She forced her eyes open, meeting his in the dim crimson glow. His face was set, his blue eyes blazing with a conviction that seemed to physically push back the dark. I don't abandon my friends. Ever. No matter how hard they try to push me away. Got it? The declaration was so simple, so Naruto. It brooked no argument, acknowledged no possibility of failure. In that moment, the psychic vision of him walking away shattered. It was a lie. This, the firm grip, the shared chakra, the determined look in his eyes, this was the truth. She gave a shaky nod, the pressure in her chest easing slightly. Got it. They climbed down for what felt like hours. The architecture of the pit changed. The rock gave way to smooth, fused walls that seemed organic, like the interior of a giant bone. Pulsating veins of dark energy ran through them, all converging downward. The air grew so thick with predatory intent it was hard to breathe. Finally, the ledge ended. They dropped the last 10 feet, landing softly on a surface that was not stone. It was smooth, slightly yielding, and warm. Naruto summoned a handful of tiny Rasengan orbs, letting them float around them like will-o-wisps, providing better light. They stood in a vast, spherical cavern. The walls, floor, and ceiling were the same fleshy, warm material, crisscrossed with pulsing black veins. In the very center of the cavern, suspended in a web of those veins, was the source. It was not a creature with form. It was a nexus, a knot of pure, ravenous absence. It looked like a hole in reality, a three-dimensional tear through which only static and hungry stars could be seen. Tendrils of void reached out from it, connected to the veins in the walls, slowly, rhythmically pulsing as it fed on the mountain's life force. The whispering was a roar here, a physical pressure that made Karin's nose bleed. The core, she gasped, the strain of maintaining the dampening field making her knees buckle. It's a wound in the world's chakra system. A leech. Sis-orcs. The voice was the cavern itself, the air, the stone. It vibrated through them. The feast comes closer. Despite Karin's seal, it had sensed them. The void knot pulsed, and the black veins in the floor beneath their feet writhed. Dozens of the tendrils of nothingness detached from the web and shot towards them, moving with silent, impossible speed. It's on to us. Naruto yelled. New plan. We hit it now. We can't just hit it. Karin cried, even as she released the dampening field, the crimson chains retracting. The full, glorious blaze of Naruto's chakra burst forth again, and the entity let out a shriek of anticipation. Its existence is a paradox. Physical force might just feed it or spread it. We have to seal it. The tendrils were upon them. Naruto erupted into action, a whirlwind of clones and Rasengans. But where his attacks struck the void tendrils, they didn't destroy them, they were absorbed, siphoned away into the hungry dark, making the central nexus glow slightly brighter. It's eating my chakra. Naruto realized, horror dawning. Karin dodged a lashing tendril, her mind racing. A seal. They needed a seal powerful enough to close a metaphysical wound. An Uzumaki seal. Her knowledge was extensive, but her power was limited. Naruto had the power, but not the knowledge. An idea, terrifying and brilliant, crystallized. Naruto, she screamed over the din, we have to merge our techniques. My chains for structure, your chakra for power. We build the seal together. How? He shouted back, poofing a clone that had been drained to nothing. The link. The one we just had. But deeper. You have to let me in. All the way in. It was the ultimate vulnerability. For him to open his chakra system to her guidance, and for her to pour her will and knowledge into his immense power. It was a fusion that went beyond partnership. It was a trust deeper than any bond she'd ever conceived. For a fraction of a second, Naruto hesitated. Letting someone, even an ally, into his chakra network was the domain of sage teachers and the rarest of healers. The risks were catastrophic. He looked at her, saw the terror in her eyes, but also the fierce, unyielding intelligence. She knew how to do this. She just needed the strength. He made his choice. Do it, he roared, planting his feet and spreading his arms, a defiant target in front of the ravenous void. I'm open. Karin didn't waste a second. She sprinted to him, placing her hands on his back. This time, she didn't weave a dampening field. She plunged her consciousness, guided by her chakra chains, directly into the torrent of his energy. It was overwhelming. It was like trying to chart a course through a golden hurricane. The sheer, joyous, stubborn life in him was almost blinding. And beneath it, the vast, simmering presence of Kurama, who regarded her intrusion with a grumbling, wary curiosity but did not stop her. Focus! She screamed at herself. Using her chains as conduits and frameworks, she began to impose order on the chaos. She shaped his chakra, guided it, weaving it into patterns older than Konoha, Uzumaki sealing arrays of binding enclosure. Crimson chains made of his chakra, amplified 100-fold, began to spiral out from his body, not from her. The entity sensed the change, the gathering of power meant not to feed but to confine. It shrieked in outrage and fear. Every tendril in the cavern retracted and then launched as one, a spear of concentrated nothingness aimed at Naruto's heart. Now, Naruto. The 8-trigram sealing style, twin Uzumaki bind, she cried, her voice a part of the chakra symphony. Naruto, acting as the vessel for their combined will, thrust his hands forward. From his palms erupted not a Rasengan, but a colossal, spinning mandala of chakra. Its outer rings were blazing gold and orange, his chakra. The intricate, impossibly complex inner lattice was crimson, Karin's knowledge given form and power. The spear of void hit the spinning seal. There was no explosion of sound, but of silence. The hungry darkness met the structured, defiant light. For a moment, they struggled, the seal straining, cracking at the edges. It's not enough. Karin screamed, feeling her consciousness start to fray. She was a tiny rudder on a cosmic ship. We need more anchor. Something it can't consume. Naruto understood. He reached deeper, past his own chakra, to the bond he shared with every living thing. Sage art. The golden crimson seal suddenly gained texture, weight, the essence of the natural world. The pattern solidified, becoming as real and permanent as the mountain itself. The void spear shattered against it. The seal, now a masterpiece of dual Uzumaki and sage power, shot forward and engulfed the central nexus. The psychic scream cut off abruptly. The knot of nothingness convulsed. The crimson gold lattice tightened around it, searing into its non-substance. The pulsing black veins in the cavern walls went dark, then crumbled to ash. The warm, fleshy material of the cavern hardened, cracked, and turned to inert stone. With a final, soundless implosion, the void nexus was gone. In its place, hovering in the air, was a perfect, palm-sized sphere of obsidian, covered in a glowing, intricate seal that pulsed with a gentle, combined gold and crimson light. It floated for a moment, then dropped into Naruto's waiting hand. It was cold and heavy, but inert. Contained. The psychic pressure vanished. The whispering stopped. The only sound was their ragged, syncopated breathing in the sudden, profound silence. The fusion broke. Karin's connection to Naruto's chakra severed, and she collapsed backward, utterly spent, her vision swimming. Naruto stumbled, catching himself on one knee, the sealed sphere clutched in his hand. He was exhausted in a way few battles had ever made him, drained not just of chakra, but of the emotional and spiritual energy the fusion had demanded. He turned, crawling the short distance to where Karin lay on the cold stone, her eyes closed, her breathing shallow. Fear, sharper than any he'd felt facing the entity, lanced through him. Karin? Hey, Karin! Her eyelids fluttered. She looked up at him, his concerned face haloed by the fading light of his remaining Rasengan orbs. There were no words for what they had just done. They had not just fought together, they had been together, in the most fundamental way two shinobi could be. His soul had held the brush, but her mind had drawn the seal. Her loneliness had been cradled in his unwavering resolve. She saw the fear in his eyes, fear for her, and something deep inside her, something that had been frozen since her mother died, cracked and began to melt. "We did it," she whispered, her voice hoarse. A slow, exhausted, but utterly genuine smile spread across Naruto's grimy face. "Yeah. We did." He shifted, sitting beside her, his shoulder touching hers, not as a strategic link, but as simple, human contact. They sat in the dark, silent cavern, surrounded by the ruins of a vanished horror, too tired to move, sharing the warmth of their survival. High above, the sound of rocks being moved echoed down. A familiar voice called out, tinged with desperation. "Naruto! Karin! Down here, Sakura!" Naruto called back, his voice raspy but strong. Help was coming. The mission was over. But as they sat in the dark, waiting, something had irrevocably changed. The line between them had not just blurred, it had been rewritten in the language of sealed light and shared strength. They were no longer just two Uzumaki survivors. They were something new. And neither of them yet had the words for what that was. Chapter 4, The Weight of a Name. The sunlight in Konoha felt different after the dark. It was harsher, more revealing, stripping away the shadows where Karin had learned to hide. The return had been a blur of debriefings, medical checks, and the oppressive weight of being seen. The story of the mountain that whispered had spread in hushed, exaggerated tones. They spoke of the great Uzumaki Naruto sealing away a primordial evil. But whispers also followed Karin, of crimson chains woven from the hero's own light, of a sealing art lost to time, of the dangerous, clever girl from the snake's den who had somehow become instrumental. She sat on a bench in one of Konoha's quieter parks, the sealed obsidian sphere now housed in a secure scroll at the Hokage's tower, a phantom weight in her memory. Her body was healed, thanks to Sakura's brisk, efficient care. But her mind felt scoured raw. The psychic fusion with Naruto had left it a residue. Not a voice, not an intrusion, but a quiet, persistent awareness. If she focused, she could almost feel the general direction of him, a subtle pull in her consciousness like a compass needle to north. She hated it. She craved it. It was the most terrifying and comforting thing she had ever experienced. The park was empty save for an old man feeding pigeons. The normality of it was an insult. Her hands, resting on her knees, trembled slightly. She kept seeing it, the void, the hunger, Naruto's unwavering back as he opened himself completely to her. The trust in that act was a debt she couldn't repay, a gift she didn't know how to hold. "Thought I'd find you here." She didn't need to turn. Her new, unwanted awareness had already tingled a moment before his voice reached her. Naruto walked over, moving with a tired grace that was becoming familiar. He wore simple training clothes, his hair damp. He'd clearly just come from a session, likely with Kakashi or the other Jonin. He sat on the bench beside her, not too close, but close enough that their shoulders almost brushed. He didn't speak for a moment, just watched the pigeons with her. "The council," he finally said, his voice low and laced with a frustration she rarely heard from him, "is being a pain in the ass." Karin snorted, a harsh, dry sound. "Let me guess. They want the artifact studied by their own specialists. They're concerned about the unvetted foreign ninja who helped create it. They want me questioned. Thoroughly." He glanced at her, surprise and admiration flickering in his blue eyes. "Pretty much word for word. How'd you know?" "I grew up in a den of snakes, Naruto. Politics is just a slower, more polite form of predation." She picked at a loose thread on her sleeve. "So? What did the Rokudame say?" "Kakashi-sensei told them to stuff it," Naruto said, a genuine grin breaking through his frustration. "Said the seal was a product of Konohanin ingenuity under extreme duress, the artifact is secure, and you're under my personal supervision as a consultant on Uzumaki sealing techniques." The grin faded. "But, it's not that simple. They're pushing for a formal evaluation. They want to know what you are, Karin. Not just who. What you are." The words were a cold knife in a familiar wound. "A tool. A resource. An Uzumaki specimen." "And what do you want to know?" she asked, her voice dangerously quiet. Naruto turned fully to face her. The afternoon sun caught in his hair, turning it to gold. His expression was utterly serious. "I want to know if you're okay." The simplicity of it disarmed her completely. It wasn't a question about her capabilities, her loyalties, or her knowledge. It was a question about her. The person who had trembled in the dark, whose loneliness had echoed in his soul during the fusion. Tears, hot and sudden, pricked at the corners of her eyes. She looked away, blinking furiously. "I'm functional." "That's not what I asked." His hand moved, as if to touch her arm, but he hesitated and placed it back on his own knee. What we did down there, that wasn't normal. Even for us. I can still feel it. Like an echo. So he felt it too. The ghost impression. It wasn't just her madness. It's a chakra resonance, she said, forcing her voice into a clinical tone. A temporary alignment of our signature frequencies due to the high-stress fusion. It should fade with time. She wasn't sure she believed that. Should it? He asked, his gaze piercing. It doesn't feel like something that should just fade. They sat in silence again, the unspoken truth hanging between them. What they had done was more than a technique. It was a communion. And it had changed the landscape between them, leaving a path where there had been only walls. They're also talking about the Chunin exams, Naruto said, changing the subject, perhaps sensing her need for a retreat. The first major one since the war. International. A show of unity and strength. Konoha is hosting. And this concerns me how? Karin asked, wary. Security's going to be a nightmare. We'll have sensory teams on constant rotation. Top-level stuff. He looked at her meaningfully. Kakashi-sensei and I, we think you should be on the primary sensory grid. Not as a prisoner or a consultant. As a Konoha nin. Officially. The world seemed to tilt. The pigeons, the sunlight, the distant sound of children playing, all of it receded into a dull roar. Konoha nin. A title. A belonging. A name that wasn't just Orochimaru's or the Uzumaki. Why? The word was a croak. Because you're the best sensory ninja I've ever seen, he said, without a hint of flattery. It was a statement of fact. And because you've earned a place. Not because of your bloodline, but because of what you did on that mountain. You fought for people you didn't know, against a horror from your own past. That's what a Konoha nin does. He made it sound so simple. So earned. But she knew the world wasn't like that. Your village will never accept me. They see the glasses and the bite marks and they see a monster. Then they'll have to get over it, Naruto said, his voice hardening with the steel that had faced down pain in Madara. I was a monster to them once, too. Remember? I'm not asking you to do this for them. I'm asking if you want to do it. For you. He stood up, looking down at her with that unwavering, sun-bright conviction. Think about it. The offer's there. No strings. No debts. He gave her a small, tired smile. And, for what it's worth, I'm glad you're here. Not just functional. Here. He walked away, leaving her on the bench, her mind reeling. The offer was a lifeline to a world of light and belonging. It was also a cage of expectations and scrutiny. The part of her shaped by Orochimaru screamed that it was a trick, a softer, more insidious form of ownership. That night, in the silence of her apartment, the offer echoed. She stared at the small succulent on her windowsill. It had grown. A tiny new shoot had appeared, a defiant spike of green. Something alive. A soft, almost imperceptible rustle at her window broke her reverie. Not a sound of wind. A controlled, precise movement. Before she could react, a small, white snake, no thicker than a pencil, slithered onto her sill. It held a tiny, sealed scroll in its mouth. Her blood ran cold. Orochimaru. The snake deposited the scroll and vanished into the night. Karin stared at the innocuous-looking paper cylinder as if it were a live bomb. Every instinct told her to burn it, to call for the ANBU. But a deeper, older curiosity, the same one that had made her study sealing arrays until her eyes burned, ached to know. With trembling fingers, she unsealed it. The handwriting was elegant, familiar, and utterly chilling. Karin. My congratulations on your intriguing performance. A fusion seal of that complexity, executed under duress with a partner of such volatile power, is a feat worthy of note. It seems my teachings were not entirely wasted. I am sure Konoha is showering you with offers of belonging. How sweet. How predictable. They will use your talent, Karin, as I did. The difference is that I never pretended it was anything else. I valued your utility for what it was, and in my way, I ensured your survival. They will ask you to be a tool for their peace. I offer you something else, answers. The entity you sealed was not random. It was drawn to a specific resonance, the resonance of an Uzumaki soul in distress. Your mother's research, which I acquired, suggested our bloodline is a beacon to such ancient hungers. There is more to your power, and your pain, than you know. If you wish to understand what you are, truly, come to the coordinates below. No traps. No demands. Merely a conversation between scientist and subject. Between the one who made you useful, and the one who can make you understand. Oh. The scroll dissolved into ash in her hands, leaving only a set of map coordinates burned into her memory. Karin sank to the floor, her back against the wall, gasping for air. The words were poison, expertly crafted. They validated her deepest fears that Konoha's offer was just another form of exploitation, prettier but no less real. They dangled the one thing she had always desperately wanted, an explanation for her own existence, for the pain that seemed woven into her blood. Your mother's research. Tears streamed down her face, silent and scalding. Her mother, who had died to save her, whose face was fading from memory, replaced by the feeling of her chakra growing cold. Orochimaru had taken everything from her, even her mother's legacy. And now he offered it back, at a price. She thought of Naruto's hand hesitating before touching her. Of his question, "Are you okay?" Of his simple, impossible offer, as a Konoha nin. She thought of the fusion, of the terrifying, beautiful moment when their wills had become one, and his trust had been an unbreakable foundation. He had seen her loneliness, her terror, her sharp, broken pieces, and he had not looked away. He had built a seal with them. Orochimaru offered understanding of a weapon. Naruto offered a place for a person. The ghost impression in her mind, that quiet awareness of him, suddenly flared. It wasn't a message, not quite. It was a surge of warmth, of concern, as if from a great distance. As if, on some level, he felt her distress. It was that, not the offer, not the fear, not the promised answers, that decided her. She stood up, wiping her face. She walked to her small desk, took out a piece of paper, and began to write with quick, sure strokes. She did not write to Orochimaru. She wrote a formal, concise report detailing the attempted contact, the contents of the message, and the coordinates. She sealed it with a basic but effective privacy seal. Then she left her apartment. She did not go to the Hokage's tower. She went to the one place her new, persistent awareness told her he would be at this hour, the training grounds near the old Nakano River. She found him there, alone, practicing a complex wind release variation under the moonlight. He saw her approaching and let the technique disperse, his expression shifting from focus to concern as he took in her face. Karin? What's wrong? Wordlessly, she held out the sealed report. He took it, his eyes never leaving hers. He broke the seal and read it quickly, his expression hardening with each line. When he finished, he crumpled the paper in his fist, a flicker of Kurama's red chakra escaping his control. That bastard, he breathed, the words thick with fury. After everything, he dares. I'm not going, Karin said, her voice surprisingly steady. But I wanted you to know. I wanted you to have the choice. To stop him. To use the information. I didn't want to hide it. Naruto stared at her, the fury in his eyes melting into something else, something vast and tender and overwhelming. She had just given him the ultimate proof of trust. She had handed him a secret that could have been a weapon, a betrayal, and turned it into a gift of loyalty. He stepped forward, closing the distance between them. This time, he did not hesitate. He reached out and took her hand, his grip warm and solid, anchoring her to the earth, to the moment, to him. Thank you, he said, the words heavy with meaning. For trusting me. He looked down at their joined hands, then back up at her face. And about the other thing, the offer. You don't have to answer now. But know this, whatever you choose, I've got your back. Not because you're useful. Because you're you. In the moonlight, with the river whispering beside them and his hand holding hers, Karin felt the weight of the name Orochimaru's finally begin to slip from her shoulders. It was replaced by a new weight, terrifying and glorious, the weight of being seen, known, and chosen. Not for what she could do, but for who she was. She didn't pull her hand away. She laced her fingers through his, a silent, seismic answer. The path ahead was fraught with suspicion, political games, and the ever-lurking shadow of her past. But for the first time, she was not walking it alone. And for the first time, the name she was beginning to want to earn, Konoha nin, felt less like a cage and more like a promise. A promise written not in the cold ink of a snake's scroll, but in the warm, calloused hand holding hers under the moon. Chapter 5, The Crucible of Exam. The air in Konoha crackled with a different kind of tension. Not the grim silence of wartime, but the vibrant, buzzing anxiety of a global spectacle. Banners in the colors of the 5 great nations and dozens of smaller ones fluttered from every pole. The streets were a river of foreign shinobi, proud Sunanin with their gourd-clad Kazekage in their midst, stoic IWA teams eyeing the lush forests with suspicion, elegant Kiri hunters moving with liquid grace, and quick-talking Kumo shinobi whose laughter was a little too loud. Konoha had polished itself to a high shine, a jewel of post-war peace. Beneath the glitter, the village's security apparatus hummed like a beehive preparing for a storm. Karin stood in the newly established Joint Security Command Center, a cavernous room in the Hokage Tower basement. Walls were covered in detailed maps of the village and the surrounding forest, the second and third stages of the exams. Dozens of sensory specialists from various nations sat at stations, their eyes closed or glowing with activation as they monitored their sectors. The air smelled of ink, sweat, and ozone. She was dressed in standard Konoha Jonin fatigues, the Uzumaki swirl a small, stark patch on her shoulder. The uniform felt alien against her skin, a costume she hadn't earned. The stares of the other sensory nin, especially the Konoha veterans, were like physical barbs. Respect was grudging, born of necessity, her range and precision were undeniable, a fact coldly established in her evaluation. Suspicion was the default. Her station was at the heart of the primary Konoha grid, flanked by Yamanaka Ino, whose mind-body techniques offered a different kind of surveillance, and Nara Shikamaru, the mission's overall tactical commander. Shikamaru lounged in his chair, eyes half-lidded, but Karin could feel the razor-sharp intellect behind the lazy facade, constantly processing the streams of data. Uzumaki, Shikamaru said without looking up from a scroll. Sector Gamma, the Western Forest Approach. Report on the Kusa-teen's chakra signatures. Ino logged a fluctuation. Karin closed her eyes, extending her senses. She filtered out the overwhelming background noise, the thousands of civilian chakra signatures like candle flames, the brighter, controlled flickers of shinobi, the hot, focused beacons of the Kage. She narrowed in on the sector, finding the 3 signatures of the Kusa team. They were agitated, but it read as pre-exam nerves, not malice. No hostile intent detected, she reported, her voice cool and professional. Adrenaline spike and mild chakra exhaustion from forced march travel. They're just tired and scared. Troublesome, Shikamaru murmured, making a note. Ino, confirm with a surface scan when they pass checkpoint 7. Got it, Ino said, flashing Karin a brief, surprisingly neutral glance. The blonde kunoichi had been civil. Not friendly, but professional. It was more than Karin had expected. This was her new reality, a constant performance under a microscope. Every call was scrutinized. Every moment of downtime was filled with the silent judgment of her colleagues and the ghostly, comforting echo of Naruto's presence. He was a distant, steady sun on her sensory horizon, moving through the village on his own duties, meeting with foreign dignitaries, inspecting genin teams, being the symbol of Konoha's new generation. The quiet awareness between them was a secret lifeline in the sea of hostile energy. The first 2 days of the exams, the written test and the preliminary eliminations in the Forest of Death passed in a controlled frenzy. Karin's senses were instrumental in preventing several fatal ambushes, her precise warnings allowing proctors to intervene just in time. She identified a Kiri genin attempting to use a forbidden bloodline technique to sabotage a rival, and pinpointed the location of a Suna team caught in a collapsed cave system. With each success, the glances from the other operatives shifted slightly, from suspicion to a wary acknowledgement. It was on the dawn of the 3rd day, during the one-on-one elimination matches in the Great Stadium, that the true attack began. Not on the genin, but on the system itself. Karin was monitoring the stadium's chakra environment, watching for signs of genjutsu or outside interference on the competitors. The matches were fierce, dazzling displays of the new generation's talent. Naruto was in the Kage's box, a visible, reassuring presence. The first anomaly was subtle. A faint, sour note in the village's ambient chakra, like a single instrument falling out of tune in a vast orchestra. It emanated from the northern water filtration plant, a critical but unglamorous piece of infrastructure. Shikamaru, Karin said, her voice cutting through the low murmur of the command center. Chakra anomaly at grid N7. Waterworks. It's corrosive. Not an attack signature. A sabotage signature. It's eating at the structural seals on the main cistern. Shikamaru was instantly alert. Corrosive? Type? Synthetic. Feels like modified water release, blended with a sealing disruption formula. Her mind made a horrible connection. It's a derivative of Orochimaru's chakra dissolution agents. Used to break down containment fields. A chill went through the room. Orochimaru's name was a curse that still carried weight. Before Shikamaru could respond, 2 more reports came in almost simultaneously from other sensory teams. The Eastern Communications Array was experiencing massive interference, and the backup chakra generators at the hospital were fluctuating wildly, their control runes being rewritten by an external signal. It's coordinated, Shikamaru snapped, standing up. They're not targeting people. They're targeting the village's support systems. Water, communications, power. They want to induce systemic collapse during the exams, cause a panic, make Konoha look weak and vulnerable. The source? Ino asked, her hands already moving to her temples. Multiple, low-powered, dispersed, Karin said, her senses stretching to their limits. The anomalies were like dozens of slow-burning fuses, scattered across the village. The signals are being relayed, through the exam's own monitoring posts. They hijacked our security network. A sophisticated, inside job. The work of someone who understood Konoha's infrastructure and its current vulnerabilities. The main screen flickered. Kakashi's face appeared, his usual laziness gone, replaced by the cool efficiency of the Rokudame. Shikamaru. Situation report. Coordinated infrastructural sabotage, Lord 6th. Using the exam network as a vector. Multiple points. Intent appears to be chaos and humiliation, not immediate mass casualties. Kakashi's eye narrowed. Contain it. Use minimal forces to avoid panic in the stadium. Naruto, you're on the communications array. It's the most complex. Sakura, take a team to the hospital, stabilize the generators. I'll handle the waterworks. Shikamaru, coordinate from the center. Understood, Shikamaru said. His eyes flicked to Karin. Uzumaki. You're our eyes. I need you to track the source of the command signal. This is a network, it has a hub. Find it, and we can shut the whole thing down. It was the most critical task. And it was being given to her. Naruto's voice came over the calm, tight with controlled anger. On my way to Combs. Karin, find these bastards. The connection broke. Karin felt the sudden, acute distance as Naruto's brilliant signature shot away from the stadium towards the eastern ridge. The comforting, constant awareness became a taut thread of concern stretching across the village. He was going into a fight, and she was stuck here, in the command center. No, she corrected herself. My fight is here. She closed her eyes, blocking out the rising panic in the room. She dove into the chakra sea of Konoha. The sabotage signals were like ugly, sputtering worms of wrongness burrowing through the clean lines of the village's energy flows. She ignored the individual points of attack. She followed the lines backward. The signals were clever, bouncing through relays, but they all carried a unique carrier wave, a specific taste of the disruption chakra. It was a flavor she knew intimately, the sterile, metallic tang of Orochimaru's labs, but blended with something else, something colder, more calculating. She traced the bouncing signal through hijacked monitor posts, through buried cables, through the very chakra-conductive stones of some older buildings. It was a dizzying, four-dimensional puzzle. Sweat beaded on her forehead. The noise was incredible, the fear of the civilians beginning to sense something was wrong, the flare of chakra as Naruto, Sakura, and Kakashi engaged at their sites, the shouting in the command center. Focus. Find the heart. And then she had it. Not in the village. Not even in the forest of death. The command hub was in a small, unassuming geological survey station built into a cliff face 5 miles north of the village walls. A station that had been decommissioned years ago, and was theoretically empty. Shikamaru, she said, opening her eyes. I have the source. Grid far north, Whisper Cliff Station. It's the hub. There are 3 signatures inside. Strong. One is the controller. The other 2 are guards. Their chakra, it's muted. Deliberately suppressed. Elite. Shikamaru didn't question her. He activated the Calm Lord 6th, source located at Whisper Cliff. 3 hostiles. Requesting interception team. Kakashi's voice came back, strained. There was the sound of rushing water and explosive tags in the background. All frontline responders are engaged containing the sabotage. We can't dislodge without risking a breach. The stadium is locked down to prevent panic. Available Jonin are holding perimeter. A grim silence fell. The saboteurs had planned perfectly. They had stretched Konoha's forces thin, knowing the village's priority would be protecting the gathered international guests and containing the visible damage. I'll go. The words left Karin's mouth before she consciously formed the thought. Every head in the command center turned to her. You're a censor, not an assault nin, one of the veteran ANBU in the room growled. The station is 5 miles out through unsecured forest, Shikamaru said, his eyes calculating. You'd be alone. And you're a primary target for anyone connected to Orochimaru. Exactly, Karin said, standing up. Her heart hammered against her ribs. They're using his techniques. They'll be expecting a frontal assault by Konoha elites. They won't be expecting a single sensor to have tracked them, or to come alone. I can disable the hub. I know the architecture of these systems. I can dismantle it from the inside faster than any assault team could blast their way in. She met Shikamaru's gaze. Give me a 4-man ANBU squad as far as the northern tree line. Just to get me through any patrols they might have. Then I go in quiet. It's the only way to stop this before they trigger phase 2. She knew there would be a phase 2. This was just the softening blow. Shikamaru stared at her for a long, agonizing second. He was weighing the value of their best sensor against the risk of losing her, against the tactical soundness of her plan. He looked at the maps, at the flickering reports of spreading instability. Do it, he said, his voice decisive. Team Ro, you're her escort to the tree line. Uzumaki, don't make me regret this. And for pity's sake, don't get killed. Naruto would never shut up about it. The ghost impression in her mind flared with a sudden, sharp spike of alarm and protest. Naruto, fighting at the comms array, had somehow sensed her decision, or Shikamaru had cummed him. The feeling was a desperate, wordless no. She closed her eyes for a second, sending back a pulse of fierce, determined focus along that tenuous link. Not reassurance, she couldn't offer that, but a declaration of intent. This is my fight too. Then she turned and followed the masked ANBU of Team Ro out of the command center and into the chaos of Konoha's streets. The run through the northern forest was a blur of green and shadow. The ANBU moved like ghosts, and Karin pushed her body harder than she ever had, using her sensory abilities to avoid natural hazards and any possible patrols. At the tree lean overlooking the cliff face, the ANBU captain gave her a curt nod. The station is in that rock face. 2 visible entrances, main and emergency. Our orders are to hold here and provide diversion if you signal or if you're compromised. Good luck. Karin nodded, not trusting her voice. She dropped over the edge of the tree lean, using chakra to stick to the cliff face and descend silently. Her senses were focused like a laser on the station ahead. The 3 signatures were there. The controller's chakra was a complex, humming knot of calculation and cold malice. The 2 guards were pools of still, deep water, dangerous and patient. She chose the emergency vent, a narrow shaft covered by a rusted grate. A basic security seal glowed on it. An Orochimaru-derived puzzle lock. She studied it for only a moment, her fingers moving with precise, practiced motions. She didn't break it, she unraveled it, convincing the seal it was being disarmed by an authorized user. The grate swung open silently. Inside, the station was dark, lit only by the eerie glow of dozens of active chakra terminals and monitoring screens showing the chaos in Konoha. The air was cold and smelled of ozone and dust. In the center of the main room, his back to her, was a man in a plain gray uniform, his fingers flying over a console. His chakra was the source of the corrosive signal. The 2 guards were positioned at the main door and near a bank of machinery. They hadn't sensed her yet. Their chakra suppression was so complete they were almost invisible to normal senses. But to Karin, they were voids of intention in the room's energy field. She had to take out the controller first. A direct attack would alert the guards. She needed silence and instant disablement. She remembered a technique from Orochimaru's archives, a sensory-derived strike. Not a physical blow, but a targeted chakra pulse aimed at overloading the specific neural pathways used for fine chakra control. It was risky, requiring pinpoint accuracy. Drawing on her own reserves, she formed the pulse, shaping it into a needle-thin lance of disruptive energy. She took a breath, aimed at the base of the controller's skull, and released. The man at the console stiffened. A soft, choked gasp escaped him. His hands spasmed on the console, and he slumped forward, unconscious, the humming knot of his malicious chakra dissolving into incoherence. But the disruption of the controller's chakra was like a flare in the dark to the 2 elite guards. They moved. Not with the roar of ninjutsu, but with the silent, lethal speed of vipers. One came from the front, a kunai aimed with deadly precision at her throat. The other blurred from the side, his fist aimed at her solar plexus. Karin threw herself backward, the kunai grazing her cheek. She had no time for intricate chains or sealing. This was close-quarters survival. She blocked the fist with a forearm, the impact numbing her arm to the elbow, and drove a knee up into the guard's gut. He grunted, but his other hand snaked out, grabbing her wrist in a grip like iron. The second guard was already behind her. She felt the kill strike aimed for her spine. In that split second, her senses screamed. And she did the only thing she could. She didn't try to break the grip. She channeled. She focused all her chakra, all her Uzumaki vitality, into a single, concentric pulse from the point of contact, the guard's hand on her wrist. It wasn't an attack. It was a sensory overload feedback, pouring the raw data of her terror, her determination, the echoing warmth of Naruto's bond, and the corrosive wrongness of their own sabotage signal back into his system. The guard holding her screamed, a short, sharp sound of utter agony as his own nervous system was flooded with discordant information. He released her, stumbling back, clutching his head. The momentary distraction was enough. Karin pivoted, her crimson chains exploding from her back not as weapons, but as bindings. They wrapped around the disoriented guard, sealing his chakra points with brutal efficiency. He collapsed. The second guard, seeing his partner fall, hesitated for a fraction of a second. It was all she needed. Adamantine sealing chains. This time, the chains were weapons. They shot forth, not to bind, but to spear. The guard moved to dodge, but Karin was already reading his chakra flow, predicting his dodge. One chain wrapped around his ankle, yanking him off balance. A second, sharper chain, tipped with a sealing formula, slammed into his chest, not piercing flesh, but impaling his chakra core, locking it down. He hit the ground with a thud, out of the fight. Breathing raggedly, blood trickling from the cut on her cheek, Karin turned to the console. The screen showed the sabotage signals were still active, running on automated protocols. She shoved the unconscious controller out of the way and placed her hands on the console. Her mind interfaced with the ugly, familiar code. It was a perversion of Uzumaki sealing logic, mixed with Orochimaru's dissolution algorithms. She didn't just shut it down. She rewrote it. Using her knowledge of both, she crafted a countersignal, a purging harmonic. She fed it back through the network, reversing the corrosive processes, reinforcing the structural seals on the waterworks, stabilizing the generators, clearing the comms interference. On the screens, one by one, the red warning lights flickered and turned green. The silence that followed was deafening. She slumped against the console, her whole body trembling with exhaustion and delayed shock. She had done it. Alone. The ghost impression in her mind blossomed into a wave of such intense relief, pride, and lingering fear that it nearly brought her to her knees. It was followed by a clear, directed thought, not words, but an image feeling, him, running, a blazing gold streak through the forest, coming for her. The ANBU team found her there minutes later, guarding the 3 bound saboteurs. They looked from the disabled elite guards to the stabilized console to the small, bruised, bloody woman standing defiantly in the center of it all. The veteran who had doubted her earlier gave a slow, deliberate nod of respect. When Naruto burst into the station, his clothes torn from his own fight at the comms array, his eyes wild with fear, he found her giving her report to the ANBU captain. She turned as he entered. For a moment, they just stared at each other across the ruined command hub. The distance was gone. The thread was pulled taut, vibrating with everything unsaid. He crossed the room in 2 strides. He didn't hug her. He just stopped in front of her, his eyes scanning her injuries, his hands rising as if to touch her face but stopping just short. "You're hurt," he said, his voice rough. "I'm functional," she replied, the old, defensive mantra falling from her lips. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Yeah. You're a lot more than that." He reached out then, his thumb gently wiping away the blood on her cheek. The touch was electric, a confirmation of everything the fusion had implied and the crisis had proven. She didn't flinch. She leaned into it, just slightly. Around them, the ANBU tactfully began securing the prisoners and the equipment. The crisis was over. Konoha's systems were healing. The exams would continue. But in that quiet, dusty room on the cliff, something new had been forged in the heat of the crucible. Not just a censor who had saved the day. Not just a hero relieved his friend was safe. A bond had been tested in fire and distance, and it had held. It had, in fact, become a weapon, a shield, and a compass. And as Karin looked into Naruto's relieved, proud, fiercely caring eyes, she finally began to believe that the name she was earning might truly be her own. Chapter 6, The Echoes We Choose. The silence after the storm was a fragile, watchful thing. Konoha had not crumbled. The Chunin exams concluded with Suna's young puppet master taking a surprising victory, and the village had projected an image of resilient strength. But within the shinobi ranks, the atmosphere was taut. The sabotage attempt had been too precise, too intimate in its knowledge. It spoke of an enemy who didn't just lurk in the shadows, but had once walked in the light of the village's own laboratories. Karin's apartment felt different. It was no longer just a cell of exile. It was a place she returned to with the grime of effort on her skin and the phantom ache of used chakra in her bones. The small succulent now had a companion, a tiny flowering cactus a street vendor had pressed into her hand with a muttered for the censor name, his eyes avoiding hers but his gesture clear. Gratitude, however awkward, was a new currency. The official commendation from the Hokage's office was a dry scroll, praising her exceptional service and invaluable sensory contribution. It granted her full, provisional Konoha shinobi status, pending final review in 6 months. It was a piece of paper, but it felt heavier than the obsidian seal sphere. It was a contract, written in trust she still feared she would break. The interrogations of the captured saboteurs yielded little. The 2 elite guards were human voids, their minds scrubbed clean by techniques that made even Inoichi Yamanaka grimace. The controller, a former Kusa researcher named Karin, was more talkative, but his words were poison-tipped riddles. "The beacon is lit," he'd whispered, his eyes fever-bright on Karin through the one-way glass of the interrogation room. He'd smiled, a ghastly stretching of thin lips. "You feel it, don't you, Uzumaki? That quiet hum in your blood when the world is still? That's not your heart. That's the echo of the deep. The maw remembers its favorite flavor." Karin had stood frozen, her senses recoiling from the manic, knowing energy in his gaze. Kakashi, observing beside her, had placed a casual hand on her shoulder, a steadying weight. "The maw?" he'd asked, his voice bored. "The hunger beneath the mountain was just a tendril," Karin chuckled. "A scout. You plugged one leak, Uzumaki. But the pressure is building elsewhere. And your chakra, so bright, so rich, so loud, you're a dinner bell ringing in the dark." His eyes had flicked to Kakashi. "You think you're protecting a weapon, Hokage? You're guarding the bait." He'd said nothing more of use. The name the maw was now a classified entry in Konoha's threat registry, a ghost story with Karin at its center. The personal aftermath was more confusing than the professional. Naruto was there. Constantly. Not with the scheduled, dutiful visits of before, but with an ease that was disarming. He'd show up with lunch, drag her to training grounds to spar, which mostly consisted of him trying to get her to practice offensive applications of her chains while she analyzed his chakra control with scathing precision, or simply sit on her floor, eating cup ramen and filling the silence with stories of his day, the petty frustrations of diplomacy, Kakashi's impossible assignments, a funny thing a Konohamaru had done. He never mentioned Karin's words. But she felt his awareness of them, a watchfulness in him that had nothing to do with duty and everything to do with a personal, protective ferocity that both thrilled and terrified her. The ghost impression between them had settled into a quiet hum, a constant, low-level connection that was less an intrusion and more a shared weather system. She could feel his frustration from across the village like a gathering thunderhead, his contentment like a patch of sun. It was Sakura who formally altered the landscape. She found Karin in the hospital archives, cross-referencing old Uzumaki seal theory with the sabotage code from the cliff station. Karin, Sakura said, leaning against a bookshelf. She wore her white medic coat, her expression unreadably professional. Kakashi-sensei wants to see us. And Naruto. Training Ground 7. Now. A summons from the Hokage, not to the office, but to the old training ground. Karin's stomach tightened. This was it. The other shoe dropping. The provisional status revoked, the questions becoming accusations. She followed Sakura through the village, her senses prickling. Training Ground 7 was empty save for Kakashi, who was perched on a fence post reading his orange book, and Naruto, who was poking at a hole in the ground with a stick, looking uncharacteristically tense. "Ah, you're here," Kakashi said, not looking up from his book. "Good. We have a mission." Karin blinked. A mission? A B rank. Border Patrol and Investigation in the Land of Rivers. Reports of strange chakra phenomena near some old ruins. Sounds dull, but it gets us out of the village for a bit. He finally lowered his book. His single visible eye curved into a smile. Team 7 could use a dedicated sensor on this one. And you, Karin, could use some field experience with a team that isn't in the middle of a catastrophe. What do you say? Team 7. The name was legendary. Naruto, Sakura, Sasuke. And now, her? A temporary replacement for the wandering Uchiha? It was an honor of such magnitude it felt like a trap. She looked at Naruto. He was watching her, his expression hopeful and anxious. She looked at Sakura, who gave a small, curt nod. Your analytical skills would be an asset. And your chains could provide unique defensive options. It was an olive branch, extended with clinical pragmatism, but an olive branch nonetheless. Karin felt the old, cynical voice rise. They're putting you on a leash. A prettier leash, with famous companions, but a leash. To watch you. To use you. But then she felt it, the warm, steady pulse from the bond with Naruto. Not pushing, just being. A silent question. Will you walk with us? She thought of the empty apartment, the whispering fear of Daran's words, the crushing weight of being only a thing to be protected or a tool to be wielded. Team 7 was neither. It was a challenge. A test of a different kind. Could she be a part of something? Not just an asset, but a comrade? Her voice was dry. She cleared her throat. I accept. Thank you for the opportunity, Lord Hokage. Kakashi's eye crinkled. Great. We leave at dawn. Pack light. And Naruto? Try not to forget your head this time. The tension broke. Naruto protested loudly, Sakura sighed, and Karin stood amidst the familiar bickering of a legendary team, feeling like an imposter who had just been handed the keys to a sacred vault. The mission to the Land of Rivers was, as Kakashi predicted, largely dull. The strange chakra phenomena were traced to a colony of migratory glowbats whose guano had interacted with a naturally occurring mineral deposit. It was a week of routine patrols, campfire meals, and the awkward, incremental process of becoming a team. Karin learned that Sakura's clinical exterior hid a wicked, dry sense of humor and a bottomless well of compassion that expressed itself in actions, not words. She learned that Kakashi's laziness was a profound form of efficiency, and his teaching was delivered in oblique, often infuriating questions that forced her to think in new ways about her own abilities. And Naruto, she learned that his easygoing nature was a choice, a hard-won discipline over a furnace of emotion. She saw the Hokage in training when he negotiated with a local mayor, the strategist when he discussed patrol routes with Kakashi, and the unwavering friend when he patiently helped Sakura collect botanical samples. And at night, by the fire, when Sakura and Kakashi had turned in, he would stay up with her. It was on their last night, camped under a sky dusted with unfamiliar stars, that the careful distance finally dissolved. They were sitting by the dying embers. The mission was a success, the report written. A comfortable silence had settled, filled with the sounds of the forest and the hum of their connection. You're quiet tonight, Naruto said, poking the fire with a stick. I'm often quiet, Karin replied, drawing her knees to her chest. Not like this. This is your I'm thinking too much and it hurts quiet. She looked at him, startled. He just gazed back, his blue eyes reflecting the firelight. He saw too much. He always had. Daran's words, she said finally, the name bitter on her tongue. The beacon. The Ma. He wasn't just raving, was he? Naruto's expression sobered. Intel from Turtle Island and what little Orochimaru has deigned to share suggests, no. He wasn't. There are entities, ancient things, that exist on the edges of the chakra world. They feed on life energy. And Uzumaki chakra, because of its density and vitality, it's like a gourmet meal to them. The confirmation was a cold stone in her gut. So I'm not just a target for mad scientists. I'm a walking banquet for cosmic parasites. Hey, he said, his voice firm. You're also the one who helped seal one of those parasites in a rock. You're not just bait, Karin. You're the hook, the line, and the damn fisher. You have the power to fight back. We have the power. We. He said it so easily. Why? The question burst from her, raw and desperate. Why are you doing this? Why the ramen, the team offer, this? She gestured vaguely between them. I was your enemy. I loved Sasuke, who tried to kill you. I'm a mess of trauma and sharp edges. I'm more trouble than I'm worth. So why, Naruto? What do you want from me? She expected platitudes. Because no one should be alone. Because it's the right thing to do. He was silent for a long time, staring into the fire. When he spoke, his voice was low, each word weighed carefully. When I look at you, he said slowly, I see someone who survived hells I can only imagine. And you didn't come out broken in the way that hurts others. You came out, guarded. Like a castle with the gates welded shut. But the castle's still standing. It's beautiful and strong, even with the scars. He looked at her, and the raw honesty in his eyes stole her breath. I know what it's like to have a monster inside you that everyone fears. I know what it's like to be seen as a tool, a weapon, a Jinchuriki first and a person second. And I know what it's like to have that one person look at you and see, you. Not the power, not the curse, not the usefulness. Just you. He took a breath. I guess. I want to be that person for you. Because you, Karin Uzumaki, with all your sharp edges and your brilliant mind and your stupid, stubborn pride, you're worth seeing. You're worth fighting for. Not because of your chains or your senses. Because you're you. Tears streamed down Karin's face, silent and unstoppable. No one, in her entire life, had ever said anything like that to her. Her mother had loved her, but it was a love tinged with desperation and sacrifice. Everyone else had seen a function, a body, a bloodline. Naruto saw her. And he valued what he saw. The wall around her heart, the final, inner keep, crumbled into dust. I'm scared, she whispered, the admission a defeat and a victory. I'm scared of this thing inside me that draws monsters. I'm scared of trusting this. Of trusting you. I'm scared I'll break it, or that you'll realize I'm not worth the trouble and walk away. He moved then. Not to hug her, but to sit beside her, their shoulders touching. He laced his fingers through hers, his hand warm and calloused and real. I'm scared too, he admitted, his thumb stroking her knuckles. I'm scared of failing to protect the people I care about. I'm scared of the weight of the Hokage hat. I'm scared of this connection between us, because it's new and huge and I don't want to mess it up. He squeezed her hand. But I'm not walking away. Not from you. Not from this. We can be scared together. That's what this is, isn't it? Not being alone with the fear. She looked down at their joined hands, at the way her pale skin looked against his, at the simple, profound reality of the contact. The ghost impression in her mind bloomed into a symphony of shared feeling, her fear, his determination, her loneliness meeting his steadfastness, creating something new, a fragile, burgeoning trust. She leaned her head against his shoulder. He stiffened for a second in surprise, then relaxed, resting his cheek against her hair. They sat like that for a long time, as the fire died and the stars wheeled overhead. No declarations of love, no passionate kisses. Just two survivors, scarred and scared, choosing to face the echoing dark not as solitary beacons, but as twin lights, their glow intertwined, stronger together. It was, Karin thought as she listened to the steady beat of his heart, the most courageous choice she had ever made. And for the first time, the future did not feel like a looming threat, but a path she might actually want to walk, hand in hand with the man who saw her, truly saw her, and chose to stay. Chapter 7, Foundations of Stone and Spirit. Konoha in the wake of the successful mission was a study in subtle shifts. The village didn't throw parades for routine beer ranks, but the gossip mills, fueled by off-duty shinobi and observant civilians, whirred with a new kind of speculation. It wasn't about the Snake Girl anymore. It was about Uzumaki Karin, the censor of Team 7. The title held weight, a tacit acceptance that was both gratifying and unnerving. Karin found herself nodding to familiar faces on the street, receiving respectful, if still somewhat wary, nods in return. The new dynamic within Team 7 was a delicate, living thing. Training sessions were no longer Naruto and Sakura with an observer. They were integrated. Kakashi, in his infuriatingly perceptive way, designed exercises that forced interdependence. Karin would be blindfolded, relying solely on her senses to guide Sakura's pinpoint strikes against moving targets. Naruto would have to defend a stationary Karin as she performed a complex chakra analysis on a poisoned Kakashi, her chains forming a reactive shield against his attacks. It was during one such session that Sakura approached her afterward, wiping sweat from her brow. "Your chakra control is exceptional," she said, her tone clinical. "The fine manipulation for your sensory threads is on par with elite medics. Have you ever considered applying it to Iryo ninjutsu?" Karin blinked, pushing her glasses up her nose. "Medical ninjutsu? My chakra, it's always been for taking things apart. Analyzing. Sensing flaws. Not healing." "Healing is just analysis and correction on a biological level," Sakura countered, a spark of professional passion in her green eyes. "You can see chakra pathways, blockages, corrupted cells with a clarity I've never encountered. Pair that with the knowledge of how to fix them," she shrugged. "You could diagnose and treat internal injuries in the field in seconds. It could save lives our current methods can't reach in time." The offer was staggering. Not just to be a weapon or a sensor for a team, but to learn a craft, to build rather than dissect. It was a path to a different kind of usefulness, one that created instead of consumed. "I wouldn't know where to start," Karin admitted. A small, rare smile touched Sakura's lips. "That's what a teacher is for. If you're interested, report to the hospital annex, 3rd floor, tomorrow at 0800. Don't be late." Thus began Karin's dual apprenticeship. Mornings were often with Kakashi and Naruto, honing combat integration and strategic planning. Afternoons were in the sterile, bright world of the hospital annex with Sakura, where she learned the intricate dance of healing chakra, the mending of tissue, the cleansing of poison, the stabilization of failing organs. It was brutally difficult. Her chakra, sharp and analytical, wanted to dissect, to understand the problem, not gently coax it to heal. Sakura was a demanding but fair teacher, her corrections precise and her praise, when it came, immensely valuable. Naruto watched this new facet of her unfold with a quiet, proud awe. Their bond, that quiet hum of connection, now carried echoes of her frustration over a stubborn cellular regeneration technique, and flickers of her triumph when she successfully stimulated bone growth for the first time. He'd show up after her sessions with a tired but bright smile, bearing 2 cups of tea, and they'd walk through the village as she talked about chakra pathway mapping or complained about Sakura's impossible standards. It was domestic. It was normal. It was everything she'd never known she wanted. The piece was a fragile vase on a high shelf. The report came to the Hokage's desk a week later. A remote site in the land of whirlpools, a place so forgotten it wasn't even on most maps, the Isara Shrine, one of the last known standing Uzumaki religious sites. A patrol from a nearby minor country had found it desecrated. The symbols defaced were not random vandalism. They were specific, blasphemous inversion seals, and the patrol had been found, drained. Not of blood. Of chakra. Sapped completely, leaving husks behind. Attached was a single, chilling intelligence fragment, sourced from an ANBU deep cover operative in the black market for forbidden knowledge, Cult of the Gnawing Star active. Target, Uzumaki legacy sites. Objective believed to be key retrieval for Maw unsealing. Ritual components include Uzumaki chakra. Kakashi summoned them to his office, the usual laziness absent. He laid it out plainly. This isn't an isolated incident. It's a pattern. They're gathering something, and they're using Uzumaki sites to do it. This shrine is the most intact one hit so far. There may be answers there about what they're after, and about how to stop them. His eye landed on Karin. This is your history. Your legacy. And it's being used as a weapon against the world. Team 7's mission is to investigate the Isara Shrine, gather intelligence, and retrieve any artifacts or information that could help us understand and counter this cult. Naruto's jaw was set, a storm brewing in his blue eyes. Sakura looked determined. Karin felt a cold dread, but beneath it, a strange, resonant pull. Her blood, her name, was calling from that ruined shrine. The journey to the land of whirlpools was somber. They traveled fast, the easy camaraderie of their recent training replaced by focused urgency. The landscape grew rocky and windswept, the sea a constant, roaring presence. The Isara Shrine wasn't on an island, but in a secluded, mist-shrouded cove, carved into the base of a cliff face that bore the weathered, swirling symbol of the Uzumaki clan. The desecration was immediate and visceral. The beautiful, spiraling stonework was scarred with jagged, hateful symbols that seemed to suck the light from the air. The heavy stone doors were smashed inward. Inside, the air was cold and stale, thick with the psychic residue of violation. Karin's senses recoiled, then sharpened. Beneath the stench of the defilement, she could feel it, a faint, ancient, and sorrowful hum. The echo of her ancestors. Split up, Kakashi said softly, his Sharingan eye active and glowing in the gloom. Naruto, with me, main chamber. Sakura, Karin, take the side passages and annexes. Look for anything intact, any records, any clues about what they took or what they were looking for. Meet back here in 30 minutes. Extreme caution. Traps are likely, both old and new. Sakura nodded, her hands already glowing with diagnostic chakra. This way. Karin followed her down a narrow, descending passage. The walls here were lined with faded frescoes depicting Uzumaki sealsmiths at work, great chains binding tidal waves, spirals representing the flow of chakra and fate. Seeing them, so proud and powerful, now defaced with crude, hungry symbols, made Karin's heart ache with a grief that wasn't entirely her own. They entered a small, circular chamber that might have been a meditation room or a private library. Shelves were overturned, scrolls torn and scattered. But in the center of the room, on a stone pedestal, was a single, untouched object. It was a dais, about the size of a dinner plate, made of a strange, non-reflective black stone. In its center was a perfect, shallow indentation, shaped like a spiral. Around the rim, etched in minute, flawless script, were Uzumaki's sealing formulae of such complexity they made Karin's head swim. "This is it," Karin breathed, approaching it. Her chakra resonated with the stone, a low, sympathetic vibration. This is what they wanted. But they couldn't take it. It's locked. Not with a physical seal. A resonance lock. It requires a specific Uzumaki chakra signature to activate. A key. Sakura examined it from a distance with her medical senses. The chakra residue around it is frantic. They tried to brute force it, to drain its energy or mimic the signature. They failed. But they'll be back with better tools. She looked at Karin. "Can you open it?" "I don't know." Karin placed a tentative hand on the cold stone. The formulae lit up with a soft, crimson light, the same color as her chains. Information flooded her senses, not words, but impressions. A trial. A test of worth. Not of power, but of spirit. The lock sought a specific emotional and spiritual frequency, unwavering protection, self-sacrificial love, the will to bind rather than destroy. The very antithesis of the cult of the gnawing star's hunger. "It's not just blood," Karin whispered, understanding dawning. "It's intent." The Uzumaki didn't just seal away monsters with power. They did it with a specific state of heart. This device, it holds a counterseal. A blueprint for the kind of binding that can restrain an entity like the maw. But to access it, you have to prove you embody that principle. A noise echoed from the main chamber, the sound of stone grinding on stone, and a low, chanting hum that was horribly familiar. The cultists. They had returned, and they weren't alone. "We have to move," Sakura said, turning toward the entrance. "We can't leave this," Karin argued, her hand still on the dais. "This could be the only way to stop them." "Then figure it out fast." Sakura positioned herself in the doorway, her fists clenched. "I'll hold them." Karin closed her eyes, pouring her focus into the stone. She poured her chakra into it, but it was like water on stone, it slid off. The lock rejected her. Why? She had Uzumaki blood. She had the power. Unwavering protection. Her mind flashed to Naruto, standing with his back to her in the mountain cave. To him trusting her with his chakra in the abyss. To his hand in hers by the fire. Self-sacrificial love. Her mother, dying to give her a few more seconds of life. Naruto, willing to bear the weight of her pain. The will to bind, not destroy. Her chains, wrapping the cult guards, not spearing them. The fusion seal, meant to contain, not obliterate. But it wasn't enough. There was a blockage in her, a core of deep, ingrained belief that she was unworthy, that she was a curse, that her very existence drew pain. That belief was a dissonant note in the harmony the lock required. From the passage, she heard Sakura's shout and the clash of combat. The chanting grew louder. They were coming. Panic clawed at her. She was failing. Her weakness would doom them all. The old script played in her head, useless. Failure. Bait. And then, through the bond, a torrent of feeling crashed into her. Not Naruto's voice, but his essence. His absolute, unwavering faith in her. Not as a weapon, not as a key, but as Karin. His trust was a blazing sun, burning away the shadows of her doubt. His protective fury was a fortress. His love, and yes, it was love, she could feel it now, pure and steadfast, was an anchor in the storm of her fear. In that moment, she made a choice. She stopped trying to prove her worth to the ancient stone. Instead, she accepted the worth that was being given to her, freely, by the man fighting in the next room. She embraced the love she felt for him, not as an obsession, but as a foundation. She chose to believe she was someone worth protecting, worth loving, worth fighting for. She poured that feeling, not her chakra, but the resonant frequency of her healed, chosen heart, into the lock. The black stone dais flared with a light that was neither crimson nor gold, but a pure, brilliant white. The spiral indentation glowed. With a soft click, the surface of the dais shimmered and transformed. The stone became translucent, and within it, a three-dimensional sealing array of breathtaking complexity rotated slowly. Beneath it, etched now into the very air above the dais, were words in the old Uzumaki script. The strongest chains are forged not in hatred of the enemy, but in love for what you shield. To bind the devourer, you must become the unbreakable shield. The seal is not a cage of power, but a symphony of willing sacrifice. Two hearts, one purpose, a harmony to silence the eternal hunger. Karin understood. The counterseal wasn't a jutsu. It was a state. A bond. A synchronization of two Uzumaki wills, perfectly aligned in protective intent. It was what she and Naruto had stumbled into in the mountain. It was what they were still learning. She committed the array to her perfect memory just as the first cultist, a man with eyes like burned-out coals and skin etched with the same defiling symbols, burst past Sakura's guard and into the room. He held a jagged, chakra-absorbing dagger. The key, he rasped, lunging for her. Karin didn't summon her chains. She didn't move. She met his dead eyes and poured the newly understood principle from the dais not as an attack, but as a field. A soft, white light emanated from her. Where it touched the cultist, his own malevolent chakra hissed and recoiled. His dagger slowed, its absorbing edge dulling. He screamed, not in pain, but in outrage, as his connection to the predatory energy he worshipped was temporarily severed. It was enough. Sakura was there, a single, thunderous punch throwing him back into the passage, where awaiting Kakashi and a furious Naruto subdued him and his companions. Naruto was at her side in an instant, his eyes scanning her for injury. Karin. Are you? I'm okay, she said, her voice steady. She looked from the now dormant, ordinary-looking black stone dais to his worried face. I found it. The answer. It's not a weapon. It's us. She reached out and took his hand. The connection between them, always present, now thrummed with the new knowledge, the ancient truth. They were the seal. Their bond, if they could master it, could be the unbreakable shield. In the ruins of her ancestor's shrine, surrounded by the defeated agents of an ancient hunger, Karin Uzumaki finally understood her legacy. It wasn't about being a beacon for monsters. It was about being the lighthouse, steady, brave, and shining not to attract the dark, but to guide others safely through it, holding fast with the one who gave her light its meaning. The foundation was no longer stone, but spirit. And it was finally strong enough to build upon. Chapter 8, The Symphony of Two Souls. The air in the Hokage's private training ground was thick with the scent of ozone and unresolved tension. Before them, etched in glowing lines of chakra-infused ink on a massive scroll, was the sealing array from the Isara Shrine, the Symphony of the Unbreakable Shield. It was less a formula and more a philosophical diagram, a map of interlocking intentions. Kakashi stood before it, his usual slouch absent. The principle is harmony, he said, his voice echoing in the secluded space. Not unison. Unison is a single note. Harmony is two distinct notes, complementary, creating something richer than the sum of its parts. Naruto, your chakra is solar, expansive, infinitely resilient. Karin, yours is lunar, precise, analytical, binding. Alone, each has limits. In harmony, according to this, you can create a seal field that denies predation on a conceptual level. He pointed to the central nexus of the array, where two spirals intertwined. This is the core. The conjoined heart. It requires a moment of perfect emotional and chakra resonance. Not a fusion like in the mountain, where one directed the other. This is a duet. You must both choose the same protective intent, with the same depth of selflessness, at the same moment, and channel it through your bond. It sounded impossible. Love and war, trust and terror, all required to be in perfect sync. The training began. It was not like any training Karin had ever endured. There were no targets to hit, no jutsu to master. They sat facing each other, knees almost touching, and tried to align. The first attempts were disastrous. Naruto's chakra, when he tried to match her, was like a cheerful bull in a china shop, overwhelming her delicate frequencies. When Karin tried to attune to him, her analytical mind would deconstruct the emotion, turning protective love into a list of variables, killing the resonance stone dead. Frustration built. The ghost impression between them, once a comfort, became a conduit for mutual irritation. You're trying to think it, not feel it. Naruto snapped one afternoon after the 100th failed attempt, running a hand through his spiky hair. And you're just blasting feeling everywhere with no control. Karin shot back, her glasses glinting. It's not a Rasengan. It's a scalpel. Maybe the problem is you're still scared to really feel it. The words were out, harsh and echoing in the sudden silence. Karin recoiled as if struck. The truth of it was a physical pain. She was scared. To open herself that fully, to trust that completely, was to hand him the power to devastate her. It was the final surrender. She saw the immediate regret in Naruto's eyes. Karin, I didn't mean. No, she whispered, standing up, her back to him. You're right. She walked away, leaving him alone in the training ground, the magnificent, useless array glowing mockingly between them. The rift lasted 2 days. The ghost impression was a cold, aching void. Naruto threw himself into other Hokage prep duties. Karin buried herself in medical texts with Sakura, but her focus was shattered. The silence was worse than the whispers had ever been. It was Sakura who broke it. She found Karin on the hospital roof, staring at the Hokage monument. He's miserable, you know, Sakura said bluntly, leaning on the railing beside her. He has a village to run. He'll get over it. That's not how he works. Sakura sighed. Look, I'm not an expert on this. But I am an expert on how stupid and stubborn that boy can be when he cares about someone. And he cares about you. A lot. He's scared too, Karin. Karin looked at her, surprised. He's scared of failing you, Sakura continued, her gaze direct. He's scared this symphony won't work when it counts, and you'll get hurt because of it. He's scared of the weight of needing to be in perfect harmony with someone else's heart. For a guy who spent his life wanting connections, the reality of one this deep is terrifying. The perspective shifted the ground beneath Karin's feet. She'd been so wrapped in her own fear of being vulnerable, she hadn't considered his. His vulnerability wasn't in being hurt, it was in the responsibility of holding someone else's fragile trust. That evening, she went to his apartment. He answered the door, looking tired and surprised. Wordlessly, she stepped inside. I'm sorry, they both said at the same time. A faint, sad smile touched Naruto's lips. Karin took a deep breath. I am scared, she admitted, the words feeling like stones being lifted from her chest. I'm scared of being that open. Of needing you that much. It feels like giving you a knife and pointing it at my heart. Naruto reached out, slowly, giving her time to pull away. He cupped her cheek. I know, he said softly. And I'm scared of dropping it. Of not being strong enough, or steady enough, to hold it safely. He took her hand and placed it over his own heart. She could feel the powerful, rhythmic beat beneath her palm. But this? This is yours. It already is. The knife's been in your hands since the mountain. And you haven't dropped it. You've used it to build with me, not break. The truth of it washed over her. In her fear, she had only seen the potential for harm. She hadn't seen the trust he had already placed in her, with his chakra, with his past, with his quiet moments. She had been holding the knife, and she had been carving something beautiful between them all along. Tears welled in her eyes. Not tears of fear, but of release. Okay, she whispered. He leaned his forehead against hers. Okay. They returned to the training ground not as two individuals trying to force a connection, but as two people who had acknowledged the terrifying depth of the bridge already built between them. They sat. They didn't try to channel. They just existed. Karin let herself feel it all, the fear, the trust, the burgeoning, undeniable love. She felt Naruto doing the same, his emotions a warm, steady tide against her shores, his protective fury, his unwavering faith, his own tender, awestruck love for her. The ghost impression didn't just hum, it sang. A single, clear note of understanding. Slowly, without force, their chakras began to move. Not Naruto's dominating Karin's, or Karin's dissecting Naruto's. They flowed around each other, gold and crimson intertwining like twin serpents in a dance as old as time. The protective intent wasn't a command, it was a shared breath. The will to shield was not a duty, but a desire. In the space between them, the air shimmered. A faint, opalescent field began to form, humming with a quiet, profound power. It didn't repel or attack. It simply was a declaration of sanctuary. A space where predation could not exist. It lasted only 10 seconds before the strain broke their concentration. They both gasped, falling back, but their hands found each other, fingers lacing tightly. They had done it. For 10 seconds, they had been the symphony. The world did not wait for them to master it. The report that reached the Hokage's office was a cascade of calamity. The land of keys, the land of tea, and the land of meadows, three small, peaceful nations, were under attack. Not by armies, but by cultists. The cult of the gnawing star had emerged from the shadows, seizing remote, geomatically significant sites in each country. They weren't killing en masse. They were capturing. And they were building massive, grotesque ritual circles powered by stolen chakra, all aimed at the same point in the sky above a desolate stretch of ocean. A triangulated ritual, Shikamaru explained, his face grim in the war room's light. They're creating a focal point to weaken the dimensional barriers. Intel suggests they intend to pull a fragment of the Ma, a physical avatar, into our world. The scale of chakra required, they'll drain every living thing in those three nations to do it. We can't hit all three sites at once with enough force, Kakashi said, his eye fixed on the map. Our forces are spread thin, containing the aftermath of the war. We need a precision strike at the focal point, the point of manifestation, to disrupt the ritual as the avatar is forming. That's where the seal will be most vulnerable. All eyes turned to Naruto and Karin. The symphony, Kakashi said quietly. It's the only tool we have that works on the conceptual level this thing operates on. You have to be there, at the focal point, when the ritual peaks. You have to harmonize and project the seal field, not to destroy the avatar, but to deny its connection to this reality, to send it back and snap the ritual's ties. It was one thing to create a fragile field in a controlled environment. It was another to do it in the heart of a cataclysm, with the fate of thousands hanging in the balance. Naruto's hand found Karin's under the table. His grip was firm, his resolve a solid rock in the torrent of her terror. She squeezed back, her answer. Team 7, reinforced by a squadron of ANBU, deployed at dawn. They traveled by the fastest means, a grim silence hanging over them. As they neared the coordinate, a barren, storm-racked atoll in the middle of nowhere, the air itself grew sick. The light was wrong, tinged a sickly purple. The very chakra in the atmosphere felt thin, being pulled towards a point just offshore. Above the raging sea, the sky was tearing. A vortex of bruised clouds spun, and at its center, a pinprick of absolute blackness was growing. From it, a sense of hunger so profound it made the mountain entity feel like a gnat emanated. Tendrils of void energy, like the one they'd sealed but 1,000 times larger, began to probe downwards, tasting the massive surge of stolen life force being funneled from the three nations. On the atoll, the cultists had erected their final altar. Dozens of robed figures chanted, their life forces also feeding the ritual, their eyes gleaming with fanatical ecstasy. They were not defending themselves. They were welcoming the end. We have to get to the water's edge, directly under the focal point. Kakashi yelled over the howling wind in psychic scream. ANBU, clear a path. Sakura, with me, protect the perimeter. Naruto, Karin, go. It was a gauntlet of madness. The cultists, in their fervor, threw themselves not as fighters, but as living sacrifices, trying to intercept them, to taint their chakra with the ritual's energy. The ANBU cut them down, but each death seemed to strengthen the vortex above. Naruto and Karin ran, side by side. A tendril of void lashed down, aiming for Naruto. He met it with a raisin shuriken, the cutting wind chakra tearing at it, but the void simply absorbed the energy and grew thicker. It was feeding on their resistance. Don't attack it directly. Karin screamed. It eats chakra. We have to get to the shore. They reached the jagged rocks at the water's edge. The vortex was directly above them now, the black pupil in the sky widening. The pressure was immense, a gravity of despair that threatened to crush their souls. The chanting from the altar was a physical force. They faced each other, the world ending around them. There was no time for gentle alignment, for quiet breathing. Now! Naruto shouted, his eyes wide, his chakra flaring defiantly against the sucking dark. Karin looked at him. At the boy who had never given up on her. At the man who saw her. At her partner. Her sanctuary. Her love. All her fear condensed, crystallized, and then transformed. It wasn't gone. It was fuel. The depth of her terror for him, for the world, was the exact measure of how much she had to protect. She reached for his hands. Now! They didn't close their eyes. They held each other's gaze as the sky tore open. The process was agony. Forcing harmony in the heart of discord was like trying to sing a lullaby in a hurricane. The void's hunger scraped at their minds, offering oblivion as a relief. The stolen screams of the sacrificed echoed in their bones. But they had practiced the truth of it. They had faced their fears. And in this moment, they chose the same thing, with the same desperate, selfless intensity. Protect him, protect her, protect everyone. Their chakra didn't intertwine. It ignited. A column of opalescent light, woven with gold resolve and crimson devotion, erupted from their joined hands and linked hearts. It shot upward, not as a spear, but as a bell jar, a dome of absolute negation. The symphony of the unbreakable shield manifested not as a seal on parchment, but as a law of reality imposed upon a small, crucial piece of the world. Where the light met the descending void tendrils, they didn't clash. They unmade. The predatory energy, the concept of consumption, hit the field of harmonious protection and simply ceased to be relevant. It was a song that could not be heard by ears attuned only to screams. The cultists' chanting turned to shrieks of betrayal as their connection to the maw was severed. The vortex above stuttered. The black pupil convulsed. The symphony wasn't pushing it back. It was defining a space where it could not exist. And as Naruto and Karin poured every ounce of their being, their love, their trust, their shared will into the field, that space expanded. With a soundless, metaphysical snap, the connection between the ritual sites and the focal point was cut. The vortex collapsed in on itself. The tendrils of void evaporated. The oppressive hunger vanished, leaving behind only the natural howl of the sea wind and the stunned silence of the atoll. The opalescent light faded. Naruto and Karin slumped against each other, utterly spent, their bodies held up only by their mutual grip. They were trembling, pale, chakra systems screaming in protest. But they were alive. The atoll was intact. The sky was clearing. In the distance, they could see the ANBU and Sakura securing the broken altar. The crisis was over. Naruto lifted a shaking hand to Karin's face, brushing a strand of sweat-soaked hair from her eyes. There were no words grand enough. So he used the smallest, truest one. Hey, he whispered, his voice raw. A weak, wobbly smile touched Karen's lips. Hey. They didn't kiss. They didn't declare their love to the heavens. They simply stood, foreheads touching, breathing the same air in the sudden, precious quiet, their hearts beating in a rhythm that was no longer just their own, but the echo of a symphony that had just saved the world. It was a harmony forged in fear, tempered in trust, and proven in the fires of annihilation. It was theirs. And it was unbreakable. Chapter 9: The Cost of Harmony. The silence after the symphony was not peaceful. It was the hollow, ringing quiet of a bell after the final toll. Naruto and Karin were carried back to Konoha, not as triumphant heroes in a parade, but on stretchers, wrapped in thermal blankets and surrounded by a somber guard of ANBU. The physical toll was immense, chakra pathways scorched, reserves drained to the marrow. But the deeper cost was spiritual. The symphony had not been a technique they performed, it had been a state of being they had become, and stepping out of that state left a phantom limb sensation in their souls. In the secure wing of Konoha General, under Sakura's meticulous and deeply worried care, they began the slow crawl back to themselves. Their rooms were adjacent. The wall between them might as well have been made of rice paper. The bond, always a quiet hum, was now a visible, tangible thing to those with the sight to see it. To Sakura's advanced medical senses, and to Kakashi's Sharingan, a cord of intertwined gold and crimson light, thrumming with potent life, connected their chakra cores, pulsing softly even as they slept. It's not just a psychic link, Sakura reported to a weary-looking Kakashi in the hall. It's a metaphysical tether. The symphony didn't just harmonize them, it rewrote a piece of their spiritual architecture to be interlocking. I don't know if it can be undone. I'm not sure it should be. Kakashi rubbed his visible eye. As long as it doesn't kill them. And as long as it doesn't make them a single target. That was the new fear. They were no longer two powerful shinobi. They were a single, legendary entity in the eyes of the village and its enemies. The Uzumaki duet, the harmony that silenced the void. The gossip was tinged with awe, and a new, sharper kind of scrutiny. They were a symbol. Symbols are inspiring. Symbols are also targets. For Naruto and Karin, the scrutiny was a distant concern compared to the internal landscape. Waking up was a process of re-inhabiting a self that no longer felt entirely solitary. Karin would open her eyes and feel the steady, solar warmth of Naruto's presence before she was fully conscious, a comfort so profound it brought tears to her eyes. Naruto would stir from a nightmare of sucking voids and feel the immediate, calming, lunar-cool analysis of Karin's mind brushing against his fear, dissecting it, soothing it. It was beautiful. It was terrifying. It was intimacy of a kind neither had dreamed possible. Their first real conversation came on the third day, when they were deemed well enough to sit in a shared sunroom. They sat on a wide couch, a blanket over their laps, watching sunlight dapple through the leaves outside. Naruto's hand found hers under the blanket. No words. Just the solid, warm reality of contact. It's different, Karin finally said, her voice soft, her gaze on their joined hands. Yeah, Naruto agreed. He didn't need to ask what she meant. He felt it too, the echo of their combined will, the memory of being a single protective intent, lingering in the spaces between his own thoughts. Does it scare you? She considered. The old Karin, the one from the cage, would have screamed yes. This Karin, the one who had chosen him on a windswept atoll, felt the fear, but it was no longer the dominant chord. It did. Now, it just is. It's like realizing you have two lungs instead of one. It's not scary, it's just how you breathe now. He brought her hand to his lips, pressing a gentle kiss to her knuckles. The gesture was so tender, so devoid of his usual boisterousness, that her breath hitched. I never wanted to cage you, Karin. Not even with this. I know, she whispered, leaning her head against his shoulder. This isn't a cage. It's a bridge. And I choose to walk on it. With you. They sat in that quiet understanding as the sun climbed higher. The path ahead was fraught, but they would walk it together. That was the new foundation. Physical healing came faster than spiritual adjustment. Within 2 weeks, they were discharged with strict orders for light duty. The village tried to return to normal, but normal had been redefined. Naruto's Hokage training intensified, the elders now watching him with a new, almost religious fervor, seeing in him and his bond the literal embodiment of Konoha's will of fire, protection through profound connection. Karin, by extension, was pulled into that orbit. She wasn't just Naruto's partner, she was the other half of the will of fire made manifest. Offers for her to teach sensory techniques, consult on sealing arrays, and even lecture at the academy poured in. She accepted a few, finding a strange satisfaction in it. Her knowledge, once hoarded for survival, was now a currency she could spend to build. But the shadow of the Maw, though banished, was long. The cult was shattered, but the entity's hunger was a force of nature, patient and cruel. Its final assault was not one of chakra or claw, but of memory and poison. It began subtly. A faint, familiar chill on the edge of Karin's senses when she was alone. A whisper in a dream that wasn't her own or Naruto's. Then, the nightmares started, not of voids, but of a specific, dark-haired figure with eyes like a winter sky. Sasuke. At first, they were just memories, painful but static. Then they became interactive. She'd dream of the forest of death, of offering him her arm, and instead of taking her chakra, he'd turn to her, his expression softening. "You were the only one who ever truly understood my hatred," the dream Sasuke would say, his voice echoing. "We are the same. Broken things who only know how to burn. Come back to the dark. It's where we belong." She'd wake trembling, the ghost impression with Naruto flooding with concern. She'd brush it off. Trauma. Lingering guilt. She didn't want to burden him with the ghost of his best friend, his rival, the man she had once foolishly loved. But the maw was cunning. It fed on her deepest, most secret shame that a part of her, buried in screaming, still believed that old, obsessive devotion was the only love someone like her deserved. That Naruto's healthy, whole love was a beautiful dream she would eventually wake from. The attacks grew bolder. Walking home one evening, the street around her melted away, replaced by the cold stone of an Orochimaru hideout. Sasuke stood before her, not as a dream, but as a perfect, chakra-constructed illusion, his presence so vivid it made her senses scream. "He pities you, Karin," the illusion hissed, its eyes spinning with a tonal pattern that was subtly wrong. "He saves everyone. It's his pathology. You're just another broken bird he's trying to fix. But he can't fix what we are. We are survivors of massacre, of betrayal. We understand the comfort of the abyss. He only knows how to stand in the light and pretend the shadows aren't there." Her chains erupted on instinct, shattering the illusion. But the words burrowed into her mind, festering. Naruto knew something was wrong. The bond carried her distress like a fever. But when he asked, she shut down, walls slamming up built from old habits and new fears, the fear that the illusion's words were true. The Ma's masterstroke came on a night when Naruto was in a late council meeting. Karin, trying to study in her apartment, was suddenly engulfed. Not an illusion in the room, but one in her mind. A full sensory and psychic overlay. She was back on the bridge during the Kage summit. Sasuke stood before her, Chidori crackling. But this time, he didn't stab her. He lowered his hand, his expression one of profound, weary regret. "I was wrong," the psychic phantom said, its voice a perfect mimicry, dripping with a sorrow that cracked her heart anew. "I pushed away the only person who ever offered me something real. Naruto offers you a fantasy of normalcy. But I offer you the truth. We are not made for light, Karin. We are creatures of longing and loss. We can be that for each other. Truly. Come find me. He'll never understand the parts of you that are like me. I will." It was a devastatingly perfect trap. It offered not the Sasuke of her obsession, but the Sasuke of her deepest, most pathetic fantasy, the one who saw her, regretted hurting her, and wanted her because of her damage, not in spite of it. It validated every hidden insecurity she had about Naruto's love being too good, too pure, for someone with her history. The pain and conflict she felt were so intense they tore through the bond like a lightning bolt. In the council chamber, Naruto jolted upright, a physical pain lancing through his chest. Karin. Terror, unlike any he'd felt on the atoll, gripped him. This wasn't physical danger. This was a soul-deep anguish. And woven into it, he felt the chilling, familiar echo of Sasuke's chakra signature, twisted and wrong. He didn't apologize. He didn't explain. He simply vanished in a swirl of yellow flash, leaving the stunned council behind. He found her in her apartment, on her knees, clutching her head, tears streaming silently down her face as she fought the psychic invasion. The air was thick with malevolent chakra and the scent of ozone. Karin. He was at her side in an instant, his hands on her shoulders. Her eyes were open but unseeing, locked on the internal horror. He understands," she whimpered, her voice not entirely her own. "The dark, it's where I belong." Naruto's heart shattered. Not from jealousy, but from a profound, empathetic grief. He saw the trap. The Maw was using the ghost of his best friend, the embodiment of his own greatest failure and most complicated bond, to attack the very core of his happiness. It was targeting Karin's most vulnerable scar. He couldn't fight this with a Rasengan. He couldn't harmonize a shield against a memory. This was her battle. He could only be the anchor. He pulled her into his arms, holding her tightly against his chest. He didn't tell her it was an illusion. He didn't tell her to fight. He simply poured his truth, his unwavering reality, through the bond. He showed her their memories. The quiet bench in the park. The shared campfire. His hand hesitating before touching her. The feel of her head on his shoulder. The symphony of light on the atoll. The feeling of her analytical mind soothing his nightmares. The simple, solid joy of walking beside her. He sent her the feeling of his love, not a pitying salvation, but a fierce, joyful choice. The choice to see her brilliance, to admire her strength, to be humbled by her resilience, to be warmed by her slowly offered trust. He loved not a broken bird, but a phoenix who had forged herself in fire and was learning to fly. He held her as she trembled, as the psychic phantom of Sasuke raged and whispered, offering shared darkness. Naruto offered only shared light, and the steadfast, unbreakable reality of his arms around her. Inside the storm of her mind, Karin was torn. The phantom's offer was seductive. It felt like coming home to a familiar, painful truth. But Naruto's presence, it was a lifeline not to salvation, but to a self she was still learning to believe in. She looked at the phantom Sasuke, so perfect in his crafted regret. And she saw the lie. The real Sasuke's regret would be for his path, for his hatred, not a beckoning call to join him in it. This was a perversion. A lure. She then looked inward, at the golden crimson tether that held her soul to Naruto's. It wasn't a chain. It was a root. It was grounded in the sun-warmed earth of ramen shops and training grounds, of whispered fears and quiet laughter, of a protection that asked for nothing but her own wholeness in return. The phantom offered to love the fragments. Naruto loved the person she was becoming, fragments and all. The choice was suddenly, perfectly clear. She turned her back on the whispering ghost. Not with anger, but with a final, gentle pity. Goodbye, Sasuke, she whispered in her mind. The girl who loved you died a long time ago. I'm someone else now. She reached back along the bond, not just receiving Naruto's love, but actively choosing it. She poured her own truth into the connection, her fear, her hope, her gratitude, her own fierce, blossoming love for the man who held her. The psychic overlay shattered like glass. The malevolent presence evaporated with a silent shriek of frustration. In the quiet apartment, Karin went limp in Naruto's arms, sobbing great, heaving sobs of release and grief and ultimate victory. She wasn't crying for Sasuke. She was crying for the last ghost of her old, tormented self, finally laid to rest. Naruto held her, rocking gently, his own tears wetting her hair. He had never been more afraid, or more proud. When her sobs subsided, she looked up at him, her eyes red but clear, her gaze steady for the first time in days. It's gone, she whispered. He brushed the tears from her cheeks. I know. It offered me everything I thought I wanted. I know. I chose you. A smile, radiant and real, broke through the aftermath of the storm on Naruto's face. I know. He kissed her then. Not a kiss of passion, but of sealing. A gentle, firm affirmation of the choice she had made, of the bond they had defended, of the future they had chosen, together, in the deepest dark of her past. The Maw had attacked the foundation of their harmony. It had failed. Because the foundation was no longer just trust or love. It was a choice, made again and again, in the light and in the shadow, to walk the bridge they had built, hand in hand. And that, they now knew, was truly unbreakable. Chapter 10, The Hokage and His Heart. The silence that followed the Maw's final defeat was not the ringing aftermath of battle, but the deep, settling quiet of a long winter giving way to spring. The psychic scars healed slower than the physical ones, but they did heal, salved by time, by work, and by the constant, quiet proof of each other's presence. Konoha, in its relentless, vibrant way, moved on. The Uzumaki duet faded from daily gossip into legend, a story told to wide-eyed genin about the power of bonds. The visible tether between Naruto and Karin's chakra hearts remained, a fascinating curio for sensory specialists and a source of endless, gentle teasing from their close circle. Do you two even need a communication seal? Kiba would laugh. Just think at each other. For Naruto, the path to the Hokage's office became a steep, polished staircase. The council, the elders, the diplomatic corps all now saw not just the hero of the Fourth War, but a man who had mastered a power beyond sheer force. The will of fire had a new, living embodiment, harmony over domination, protection through unity. His training under Kakashi became a whirlwind of policy, economics, and statecraft, but his teacher always brought it back to the core. A village isn't a fortress, Naruto, Kakashi would say, looking pointedly out the window at the two figures training together on a distant field. It's an ecosystem. Your job isn't to be the strongest tree, but to nurture the soil so everything can grow. Naruto understood. He saw his future role not as a solitary peak, but as part of a range. And Karin was the adjacent, steadfast mountain without which the landscape would feel incomplete. For Karin, redemption crystallized into purpose. Sakura's mentorship bore extraordinary fruit. Combining her preternatural sensory precision with advanced aerial ninjutsu, Karin pioneered a new field, chakra pathway reconstruction. She could not only diagnose the most subtle chakra organ traumas but, using microfilaments of her chains as conduits, scaffold damaged pathways for healing, something previously impossible. Her first major success, saving a jonin whose tenketsu had been obliterated by a rogue lightning technique, made her a legend in the medical corps. The offer to lead the new sensory and medical integration division was not a political appeasement, it was earned, through sweat, brilliance, and saved lives. She still wore glasses. She still had bite marks on her arms. But they were no longer brands of ownership. They were simply part of her map, a history she had integrated, not escaped. Their lives became a dance of public duty and private sanctuary. They lived in separate apartments, a conscious choice to preserve spaces that were wholly their own. But more often than not, Karin's succulent and cactus sat on Naruto's brighter, Messier windowsill, and a spare orange jacket hung in her orderly closet. Their romance was not the stuff of ballads. It was in the quiet moments, Naruto, exhausted from a day of diplomatic headaches, finding her in her office late at night, her nose buried in a scroll, and wordlessly placing a cup of tea beside her before collapsing on her small sofa to nap. Karin, sensing a spike of frustration in him during a council meeting, sending a single, calming pulse through the bond, "I'm here," and watching the tension ease from his shoulders from across the room. It was in shared, silly arguments over the best type of ramen topping, and in silent walks through the memorial stone, each honoring different ghosts but drawing strength from the shared, living hand they held. The world tried to intrude. There were still voices, murmurs in polished halls, questioning the propriety of the future Hokage being so irrevocably tied to a woman with her history. There were offers from other nations, veiled in flattery, seeking to borrow Karin's unique talents. There were moments of crushing pressure, when the weight of expectation on Naruto felt like a physical thing Karin could feel compressing his spirit through their link. But they had faced literal world-ending hunger. Petty politics and whispered doubts were a mild irritant in comparison. They handled it as a team. Naruto's public speeches began to subtly include the language of integration, of strength found in complementary difference. Karin, in her own rare public addresses, spoke with a calm, sharp authority that brooked no argument about her loyalty or her value. Together, they were an undeniable fact. The day of Naruto's inauguration as the 7th Hokage dawned clear and bright. Konoha was a riot of color and noise, the air thick with celebration and hope. Standing on the balcony of the Hokage's residence, looking out over the sea of faces, Naruto felt a profound calm. The dream was here. The weight of it was immense, but it was a weight he was designed to bear, not alone, but as part of something greater. He wore the traditional Hokage robes over his usual outfit. The hat sat beside him on the railing. He wasn't ready to put it on yet. The door behind him opened. He didn't need to turn. Her presence was a cool, clear stream in the tumult of his senses. Karin walked to stand beside him, resplendent in formal Konoha Jonin attire, the Uzumaki swirl prominent on her vest. Her glasses gleamed in the sun. "Nervous?" she asked, her gaze on the cheering crowd. "Nah," he said, a small smile touching his lips. "I've got you." She glanced at him, a real smile, still rare, still breathtaking, lighting her face. "That's a terrible security policy." He laughed, the sound bright and free. They stood in comfortable silence, watching their home celebrate. "It's strange," Karin said after a moment, her voice softer. "I used to look at this village and see a cage of happy people who would never understand. Now I look at it and see my home. The people I help heal. The systems I help protect." She looked at him. "Because of you." He shook his head, turning to fully face her. "No. Because of you. You chose to stay. You chose to fight for it. You chose to heal it. I just held the door open." Her eyes shone with unshed tears. The bond between them hummed with a profound, peaceful joy. The ceremony was a blur of pomp and powerful emotion. Naruto's speech was not a listing of his achievements, but a vision of a Konoha where every strength had a place, where the outcast could find a home, where protection meant nurturing growth. The crowd roared its approval. When Kakashi placed the hat on his head, the roar became a thunder that shook the very leaves of the trees. Naruto Uzumaki was the 7th Hokage. The celebrations lasted all day and into the night. There were feasts, speeches, dances. Naruto was swept away on a tide of well-wishers. Karin stayed on the edges, smiling, accepting congratulations, but always with one part of her awareness anchored to that bright, central sun of chakra that was now her Hokage. It was near midnight when they finally stole a moment alone, escaping to the one place that had seen all of Naruto's journey, the rooftop of the Hokage monument, overlooking the village lights. The sounds of the festival were a distant murmur. Up here, there was only the wind and the stars and the profound history carved into the stone beneath their feet. They stood before the face of the 4th, Naruto's father, the original beacon of hope. "He'd have liked you," Naruto said softly, his hand finding hers. "Mom, too. They'd have seen another survivor. Another fighter." Karin leaned into his side, drawing strength from his solid warmth. "I wish I could have met them." They stood in silence, looking at the village they had both fought to belong to, and now led in their own ways. "It's done," Naruto said, but there was no finality in his tone. It was the sound of a beginning. "It's just starting," Karin corrected gently. He turned to her then, his blue eyes serious in the starlight. He reached up and took off the Hokage hat, holding it in his hands. The symbol of his dream, of his life's work. This is for the village," he said, his voice low and heartfelt. "It's who I have to be for them." He took a deep breath. "But who I want to be, that's for you. That's the man who gets to come home to you. The one who trusts you with his fears. The one who gets to love you, every single day." He set the hat down on the stone between them. He reached into his pocket and pulled out not a ring, but a small, simple object. It was a hairpin, crafted from polished, warm-toned wood. At its end was a tiny, exquisite carving, not the Uzumaki swirl, but two spirals, one gold, one crimson, intertwined into a single, harmonious knot. I had it made from the wood of the first training post I ever hit on this mountain, he said, his voice rough with emotion. The start of my journey. He held it out to her. Karin Uzumaki. You are my harmony. My sanctuary. My choice, every day. Will you build that life with me? Not as the Hokage and his advisor, but as Naruto and Karin. Together. There were no grand vows promised, no declarations of eternity. Just a simple, profound question about the daily choice to walk forward, side by side. Karin looked from the humble, beautiful hairpin to his earnest, waiting face. She felt the truth of it in her bones, in the golden crimson tether that was the most real part of her. He wasn't offering to complete her. He was asking her to continue building something with him. He was offering a partnership written not in legend, but in the quiet moments, the shared burdens, the private joys. Tears spilled over, tracing clean paths through the dust of the long day. She didn't speak. Words were insufficient. Instead, she reached out and took the hairpin. With steady hands, she pulled her own simple tie from her hair, letting the vibrant crimson fall around her shoulders. She slid the pin into place, securing her hair back. The twin spirals rested just above her temple, a quiet declaration. Then, she placed her hand in his. As their fingers laced together, something miraculous happened. The ever-present, visible tether of light between their chakra hearts didn't just glow. It blossomed. For a moment, a soft, opalescent radiance, the same light as their symphony, enfolded them, a gentle aurora visible only to the stars and the stone faces of the Hokage. It was not a technique. It was an echo, a blessing from the bond itself, affirming the choice. The light faded, leaving them standing hand in hand under the infinite sky. Naruto's answering smile was the sunrise. He brought her hand to his lips, kissing her knuckles, his eyes saying everything words could not. Below them, Konoha slept and dreamed, protected by the will of its people, led by a Hokage who understood that the strongest foundation was not a single pillar, but the interlocking strength of many. And on the mountaintop, two survivors, two healers, two Uzumakis, stood as one. Their slow-burn romance, forged in pain, tempered in trust, and proven in the fires of salvation, had found its quiet, everlasting flame. The story of the hero and the outcast was over. The story of Naruto and Karin, of the Hokage and his heart, was just beginning. And it was a story they would write together, one chosen day at a time.